Please take your seats, members. Good evening and welcome to this evening's council meeting. Before we start our meeting, I'm going to invite Reverend James Rattu to open this evening with some words of reflection and prayer. Thank you, James.
We keep a few moments of quiet to commit this evening's meeting. Lord of us all, we ask your blessing on the borough of Waverley with all its diversity, the souls who call it home, the people who come here to work, the children of its schools and the old, the towns and the villages that make it up. May harm and danger be far from it, so that all its people can pursue peace and goodness without fear. Lord, all the created world serves you, and we are aware of our common nature as your children. Please strengthen us and all those elected to public office in this borough for the work we are called to do. We are aware that there are many needs and interests that must be balanced so that the decisions we take can be just. Please help us listen with a desire to find the best way forward. We bear in mind, especially, the reorganisation of Surrey authorities, issues regarding planning, funding, waste management, and other things which will be discussed this evening. For those who work for this borough and who serve its people and purposes, we pray diligence, steadfastness, and care. Lord, we remember the Mayor's charities this year, the Meath and Skillway, and we thank you for all those who give up their time and energies to serve others, people of many different faiths and none. May no act of kindness in this community go unrewarded. And in this winter of rest, in this winter season, we pray for the continued fruitfulness of the earth, which we cannot survive without, for favourable weather, and for the courage to preserve and restore your great gifts to us. Help us to share the good things we have and the abilities we possess, to defend all that is right and good, so that your children may flourish. And in a world where peace seems far away from so many of your children, where violence and conflict scar and destroy lives, we pray for peace in our communities so far as depends on us. And whatsoever befalls us, give us the gifts of generosity, truthfulness, and kindness we need to nurture now and in the times to come. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And I'm sure that we all send our very best wishes to your congregation of St. John's in Farncombe, and may the Christmas lights going on Friday go really well. Thank you very much. You're very welcome to stay, but I expect there might be something good on television, only I have to say to you that that's quite a good remark to make to James. He doesn't have a television. Maybe a good, or maybe a good book. Thank you. So before we begin this evening's meeting, there are a few housekeeping comments. Members, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak, and of course you'll be operating your own microphones. If you're unable to hear, please indicate. This evening's meeting will be live streamed, and you'll be using your electronic voting systems that are in front of you. When a vote is called for, it's the vote for is on the left, abstain is in the middle, and if you wish to vote against, press the button on the right. And we can also agree a recommendation by general assent. Speeches will be timed at 4 minutes, other than in accordance with the Council Procedure Rule 15.5, content and length of speeches, and you will be given a 30-second warning before your time is up. And I've been reminded this evening that I can stop you at 4 minutes. So members may also only speak once on each item, except in the circumstances as set out in Procedure Rule 15.6. if you are making a point of order, please be clear about which rule or law you think has been breached and how, and wait for agreement before you proceed. Please note that electronic devices should only be used for the purpose of this meeting and should not distract anyone else. If the meeting continues beyond 9 p.m, there will be a comfort break at an appropriate point. So we come to agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Kim, are there any?
So apologies for absence this evening. We have apologies from Councillor Merriweather, Councillor Coburn, Councillor Rubini, Councillor Keane, Councillor Mirrlees, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Morrison, Councillor Atkins, Councillor Lawton and Councillor Barker-Lomax. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Austin.
Councillor Rulleen.
Any other apologies? Thank you.
Thank you. In agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any? No. Agenda item 3 is the minutes. The minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 22nd of October 2025 have been published online and circulated. I move approval of the minutes. Do I have a seconder?
Please to second, Madam Mayor.
Is everybody agreed? Councillor Austin.
I will be abstaining, so thanks.
All those in favour of agreeing the minutes, please show. Okay, that is carried. Agenda item number 4 is announcements. I'll just make a few if I may. Just to report that we've been busy mayorally representing you at sports awards, at GCSE celebrations, at choral and band concerts, and it was a privilege to meet the Queen at St Catherine's School in Bramley and to attend with our leader the carols at Charterhouse on Sunday. And thank you very much for those of you who are wearing Christmas jumpers as per my request, so that you can make donations to support the Meath in their work for those living with complex epilepsy. And I must say that those who are not wearing Christmas jumpers, your donations are equally welcome and perhaps ought to be doubled. Thank you. Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, members of the public. A few short announcements. First, LGR, not much on this right now because I'll be obviously saying a fair amount on this later during my motion, but just to flag, if members haven't seen, for their awareness, the batch of extraordinary sessions next week to address the establishment of the joint committees for the East and West and the nominations to those committees. These sessions are taking place over the next couple of weeks in all 11 boroughs and districts, as well as Surrey County Council. Secondly, a recent legal decision that is pertinent to Waverley and its recent business. The High Court upheld Bracknell Forest Borough Council's decision regarding the loss of a self-build exemption under the Community Infrastructure Levy, or SIL regulations. And more importantly for this authority, has confirmed that the collecting authorities, as has been claimed by some councillors and third parties, do not have a general discretion to waive or refuse to collect SIL that is lawfully due. The judge further went on to rule that any changes to this position will need to come through Parliament and cannot be made by individual authorities. As the judge has ruled, this is a government tax set by and regulated by government, and this, of course, was and is the position that this authority has held on this case from the start. Now, other than the basic principle of following the rule of law, this authority did not want to give the impression to any resident that some of the remedies being proposed elsewhere were possible, legal, or in some cases even wise for that resident to accept. Now backed up, of course, by this recent ruling, we have always sought to resolve this through discretion of our enforcement policies and now through the SIL discretionary review process. And I wanted to take this opportunity once again to urge anyone who thinks they have been wrongly charged for SIL to apply through that process. And very finally, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Steve Williams for all of his work over the last 6 years on the executive as portfolio holder for environment and sustainability, which is in fact longer than I think any of the officers have served in that role in almost any authority in Surrey, going right back to the incarnation of this version of Waverley Borough Council. So thank you, Councillor Williams, for all of your time and service and work. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Pedro. No. Deborah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been advised by Councillor George Murray that he is now the group leader for the Farnham Residents Group.
Thank you. There are no questions by members of the public, which is agenda item 5. So move to agenda item 6, which is questions by members. We have 3 questions. Councillor Beeman, do you have any supplementary?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a short one. Given the constraints which may be imposed by the water cycle study, does this administration have any intention to undertake other studies for other constraints, such as highways, secondary school education places, and, for example, recreation grounds, flooding, and so on, which might prevent this authority meeting its housing targets?
Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Beeman, for your supplementary question. Obviously, within the local plan process, we will be taking on a transport expert ourselves, and they will be liaising with Surrey Highways and producing a transport assessment report. We'll also be liaising with the Education Authority, and also we will be undertaking again a playing pitch strategy, which we've previously undertaken before. So there are lots of documents and supporting evidence that we will be publishing all on our website to support the new local plan. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Councillor Beeman, again, do you have any supplementary question for your second question?
Just to say that I'm sure it was a happy coincidence that this announcement was made just 24 hours after I submitted the question, but I'm sure that was a happy coincidence. Just to say, I'm very grateful to the authorities for providing free bus services, the Waverley Hopper in Farnham, Godalming, Hazelmere and Cranley this year again. I fear this is one of the things that might become a casualty under unitary authorities.
To confirm, on behalf of Councillor Miralles, who unfortunately isn't well this evening, it's my understanding that we did issue a press release just prior to this, but reconfirmed it as a result of your message, as we believed that quite a few people hadn't seen it. And I would also agree with you, Councillor Beeman, that as this comes under the bracket of discretionary spend, it is unlikely that the unitary would be able to cover any of this sort of thing going forward. And I agree that would be a great shame.
Thank you. Councillor Kenreid, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a short one. In response to the second point that I raised, asking when construction was now expected to commence, we were told that it is now going to be sometime, hopefully, by next summer. And there's a note that says, during this period, market conditions changed significantly and the costs have had to be reassessed. That raises a concern with me. Is there any chance that the project may be cancelled as a result of these changes in costs?
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reid, for your supplementary question. There are no plans at all to cancel this project that I am aware of. We have suffered from some delays, and obviously with all projects, as people will know, all construction projects have been subject to variations due to market conditions, and that is very unfortunate. However, we will be going ahead with this project. It's, a really important project for Cranley and also for this borough. And I hope to see spades in the ground by next summer. Thank you.
Thank you. So we come to agenda item number 7, which is the extended producer responsibility. Are there any questions on clarity for this? No. So, Councillor Follows, may I ask you to move the adoption?
Thank you,
Councillor
Madam
Hyman,
Mayor.
Was there a question from the back?
Yes, having looked at page 40 of the of our agenda papers tonight, the main papers, which at the bottom saying what your payment covers, I have some difficulty in knowing whether the proposals from our council on page 33 and page 34, I think they are. Just correct that, check that. Yes, on pages 33 and 34 seem to be vague, so I don't know. It's very difficult for me to tell whether or not what we're doing is going to be is compliant. Now, I would hope, obviously, the officers have checked that. I'd like that to be perfectly clear. But the main issue that I've got with this is, of course, that the purpose of this, having been to the to the PAC UK
Councillor
website.
Hyman, do you have a question?
Yes. Is this in line with PAC UK, and does this mean we're going to have a load of money left over? Effectively, the producers, the polluter pays. The producers now paying for part of our waste recycling service, such that in our budget we're going to have to be, we will have spare money which we could perhaps give back to the residents in the form of not increasing council tax.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Councillor Follows.
So section 12.2, the legal implications, deals with almost all of that. Certainly all of the things that have been put in Appendix 1 are compliant with the terms of the regulations. I think as I will be describing in my substantive speech on the subject this evening, because of the nature of EPR, and I won't say it now as I'm going to say it properly in a minute, the nature of EPR means that it's very difficult to treat it as long-term revenue in lots of different ways. And so actually the peaks that we have now are unlikely to be sustained for various reasons that I'll get to in a moment.
To move the motion.
I'm certainly pleased to move this motion. I believe I have a seconder.
Do you have a seconder?
I'm sure I do somewhere. Yep.
Councillor Keogh.
Happy to second, thank you.
And
Thank you
would you
very
like
much.
to reserve your right to speak? Councillor Follows.
Thank you very much. Can I first of all just start by thanking our officers for all of the work on this item, as well as Councillor Williams, as much of this work was on his watch. The government's extended producer responsibilities, also known as EPR, scheme started providing funding to councils in the 25-26 financial year. The scheme collects funding from manufacturers of products based on the amount and type of packaging they are using. Now, funds collected to each council are calculated with consideration to deprivation, rurality, waste collection methods, number of units and tonnes of recycling collected per household. The funding amount for Waverley highlights we are currently a high-performing authority in terms of our recycling rates. Now, the funding must be used to drive improvements in the efficient management of household packaging waste. Where this sort of scheme has been enacted in other countries, you often see a peak at the start and then a tapering off of the funding over time. And this usually happens for one of two reasons, and sometimes both. First, especially for high-performing recycling authorities, as Waverley is, the proportion of funding per authority reduces as other authorities step up their efforts and the proportional level of recycling equalises. And secondly, producers start to change their behaviour and their packaging over time. Now, I would argue, and I think many of you here would agree, that both outcomes are actually excellent from a wider environmental and sustainability perspective. But they do mean that we actually cannot take this to be an ongoing revenue stream. This is effectively ad hoc money. It's very difficult to count it as anything other than that. Now, Appendix 1 details how we propose to use this funding in compliance with the regulations. And can I just take the opportunity to thank Councillor Hess for his two questions that he asked in advance. The first relates to public bin labelling to better enable the public to report full bins and other issues. The second relates to additional street cleaning in various towns and villages within Waverley. I feel it's very likely that the first item on the labelling of bins is possible to include within the service improvements and legislative compliance line, and I'll discuss that further with officers. Gut feeling, that feels like something that would make sense because it should enable residents to recycle more by doing things like reporting a bin that's over full. I think I would argue personally that's quite justifiable, but I will need to confirm that with officers. The second section on street cleaning feels less compatible with the regulations, but I'm quite confident that we can discuss that either as part of this or more generally in the round, and I will include that in my discussion with officers going forward. So thank you, members, for your time, and apologies, Councillor. I will get back to you with firm responses on both of those items by the end of this week so that you've had that in writing from me. Thank you, members, for your time. I'm pleased to move these recommendations to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would, of course, be speaking on this item as portfolio holder for Environment and Sustainability had I not resigned from the post. And I thank the leader for his kind words earlier on. I will miss the friendship and support from members of the executive, and I will very much miss the role and working with the officers in the way that I have done over the past 6.5 years. However, I resigned from the executive because of being placed too often in the position of having to be an apologist for Liberal Democrat timidity and tribalism in place of the collaborative cross-party approach that was once the hallmark of this council. And here is an example of timidity. We need to agree the spend because we otherwise risk losing the money. But the paper is not ambitious enough. EPR is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. At last, producers will pay the true cost of dealing with packaging waste, opening up opportunities for councils to design better services, collections that keep materials clean and valuable, systems that reduce waste, not just collect it, and reuse and repair hubs that cut landfill and support our communities. Yet this strategy does not sufficiently seize that opportunity. It focuses on bin sizes and not service quality. It retains commingled recycling, even though separate paper and card collections are now recognised as essential to reduce contamination. It maintains fortnightly refuse collections, where many councils are adopting 3 weekly cycles to drive higher recycling and lower waste. It is a collection policy, not a circular economy strategy. Other councils, Lancaster, Greater Manchester, and many in Wales are already moving boldly forward, introducing 3 weekly residual waste collections, separating materials properly, and building thriving reuse and repair infrastructures. They are designing systems that are future-proof, resident-friendly, and environmentally responsible. We should be doing the same. Residents expect leadership from us. They expect ambition. They expect us to spend new national funding, not merely to keep our waste system running, but to improve it dramatically. I would urge that we now take seriously the opportunity that EPR provides, review the weaknesses in our current plans, embrace reuse, repair and reduction in waste, not just recycling, and adopt a significantly more ambitious approach to our shared environmental future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to see these significant changes to waste funding with extended producer responsibility. It is, of course, a Conservative reform delivered through the Environment Act 2021, and it's now bringing real money into councils like ours. And for Waverley, that is significant, isn't it? It's 2.2 million payout in 2025-26. So I would like to offer my congratulations to the waste team and actually to Councillor Williams for your work in this area and achieving such a good result. Of course, Councillor Williams has already highlighted this money must be spent on improving efficiency and effectiveness of managing household packaging waste. The report defines if it's not spent correctly, if it's not spent at all, it can be given back to government and future allocations reduced. And I was very interested to listen to what Councillor Williams actually had to say just now about his concerns. I can certainly, I would support an increase in recycling collection, for example. I can attest to my bins, my recycling bins overflowing every 2 weeks. This funding, though, in summary, it does exist because a Conservative government took the decision that polluters should pay, not households. That principle shifts the burden away from council taxpayers and onto those who create the waste in the first place. So overall, I'm very pleased to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I realise the leader has already dealt with Councillor Hess's request for additional street cleaning. but I'd just like to add my support to that. Councillor Hess has been campaigning on this issue for 6 years now, and I've already put a considerable amount of money aside for his gold watch. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. There are some things about this I find difficult. They've introduced a new terminology. This is PAC UK, created by the government to manage this, of net efficient costs. This is new wording for us. I don't know whether anybody in this room knows what net efficient cost means. And if you Google it to find out, it doesn't actually exist as terminology. So I don't like it when people do that sort of thing. What we do know about this is that the government has decided that we are going to take money, quite rightly, I think, from the people who are creating the problem of stuff that's not recyclable. And it's an effort to try and enable us to recycle a lot more, so a lot less goes into landfill. This is going to take considerable behaviour change from particularly where there are shared bins, so nobody's held responsible for all the pizzas, the leftovers and nappies that are put into our blue recycling bins. You know, householders might be worried that the bin men can look and see if they've done that. So, but we've got an awful lot of flats around with shared bins now. Of course, it doesn't apply to street bins. It doesn't apply to littering or whatever, which is unfortunate, but understandable because this is about what it is about. My concern is that actually it is our residents who end up paying for this ultimately. We will pay, we and all our residents will pay through increased prices of things that are packaged, but by the increased costs of having to have new styles of packaging that can be recycled. And so where there is money, where that cost is now being taken up by the government through PAC UK and the PEPR system, that means that particularly in this council year, what we've got is a couple of £1 million coming to us for stuff we haven't done that we ought to have been doing but didn't know about. We should be doing things about it. We can expect possibly to lose some of it, as the council leader has implied, in future years. We cannot rely upon it. But as this is something which our residents have already paid through their council tax for that recycling to be done and managed by us, and now we're getting in money paying for that, our residents should be given their money back. They've paid for it through an increase in council tax last year, and I see absolutely no reason. I think most of our residents would agree, actually, with Councillor Hess that some of it should be spent on cleaning. This is not the money that we're getting from PEPR. We can't spend that on anything but what they say. But the money which we are going to be saving, which we are getting back, we should be able to put into to give back to residents, and perhaps some of it to be spent on something which we're never going to get under LGR. We're probably not going to see it. We should invest in some street cleaning equipment now, I think, so that we've got it for the future. We might have to share it with Guildford, of course, or they might want to do the same thing. We could possibly manage it through the waste, through the grounds maintenance system that we've got in-house now. But I would think most of this, if you ask the residents, should be given back to the residents because they've already paid for it. And this is money that we are being given for stuff that they've paid for.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. I'm stopping you there. Councillor Kenreid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A number of councillors will have been around, as I was, when recycling was introduced to this borough in the early '80s. At that time, we had segregated card, glass and paper collections. Following that administration, the next administration decided that they would go to the commingled bins. So we've been operating for what, I don't know, 15 years or no, maybe longer than that, almost 20 years with the commingled collections. I do agree with Councillor Williams that we should be moving back to having segregated collections of our waste. but we've been operating under the current system for the last 20 years. I see no point in rushing within the next year to going to those segregated collections. Indeed, Councillor Williams himself has been operating for the last 6 years, and this is the first time I've heard him mention it. So I think, yes, we will be getting there, but we don't have to do it this year. And I hate it that we tried to politicise the whole debate. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We have two other speakers, Councillor Ward and Councillor Liz Townsend. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't actually going to speak on this until commingling popped up. And we see not infrequently in the papers frustrated householders in many other boroughs with 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10 little bins lined up in their house that they have to separate everything out into. In my youth in this council, I was very against commingling. And then some time ago, probably before many of people in this room were councillors, we organised a trip to the separation authority where this commingling was separated. And apart from being horrified at some of the jobs these poor people had to do, I have to say, I was converted to commingling. So if we have any debate on this, we might organise another trip to the separation facility and let councillors see how it works.
Thank you, Councillor Liz Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And, whilst I acknowledge that the EPR was introduced under the Conservative Party, I think it was in 2019. They then kicked it down the road for several years, and it's only now that it's actually come into play. So I would just like to say that obviously I welcome everything that's within this report. The report does commit to monitoring the recycling rates, and so I think that is something that we will be looking at in the future, and I hope that puts Councillor Williams' mind to rest that we will be doing that monitoring and looking into things. And obviously we're all very open to any kind of for Councillor Williams to come and speak to us at any stage to discuss the project that's going through. Thank you.
Thank you. One other speaker, Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do remember when we first started sorting our waste. I was actually one of the people that had one of the very first baskets on the side of the road. I see under education and engagement, promote greater community outreach by engaging with parish councils. That interests me. What engagement are we going to do with parish councils? Are we going to collect their waste, help them work out how to collect their waste, which of course they already do? I just wondered about that statement, if anyone can clarify.
Okay, are there any other speakers? Councillor Hess.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, on the same point, the education and engagement, it might be time for new stickers to go onto bins. This is separate to what I was talking about. I'm talking about wheelie bins at households. We have had labels on. Mine have worn off. They've suffered from the depredation of the weather. To remind people what they should put in and what they should not put into their bins. If we're not going to have separate bins for individual materials like paper and cardboard, I think there should be some education for residents as to what they should put in, what they shouldn't put in, whether they should wash out containers, not to put in containers that have got remnants of food in them and things like that. I don't know what you should or shouldn't do myself. So I think that education item, which is number 6 on my list, could be looked at to actually relabel our council bins. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Just brief one, Madam Mayor. I just felt my co-counsel would like to know that Councillor Hess has just said exactly what I was going to say. Thank you.
think you missed the training. Are there any other speakers? If not, Councillor Keel, would you like to speak now? No, Councillor Follows.
Thank you very much. I'll try and cover as much of this as I can. So, Councillor Hess, in terms of the labels, I think we are getting new ones. There's guidance on the website, but what I did when the last batch of new stickers were taken, I actually got, I took a huge roll of them because almost every resident that then asked me for one, I had some in my office, to the point that I nearly thought about including them in Christmas cards one year because they were so useful for people. So I think the new stickers are coming and we'll make sure that there's a stock available so residents can ask them separately. Just in terms of things, town and parish council engagement, obviously I'm also a town council leader in another hat. One of the things that struck me about town and parish events is that often the waste management of the town and parish events, I mean, Godalming hosts some pretty big events. There's a lot of plastic, there's a lot of other issues, there's a lot of hawkers and peddlers, for example, peddling some things that are not often particularly sustainable. Without a great deal of ability to regulate. So firstly, we'd like to consult with towns and parishes about the sorts of things they might be interested in. But just off the top of my head, there are a handful of things where there are events that generate a higher waste proportion than your average day to day. I also think we need to kick off some more discussions about the numbers of and collection of bins within certain parishes where we know we've got some high point issues. Councillor Hyman, I completely agree with you that producers are likely to try to offset their costs. One of my concerns about this is that often the packaging that is the cheapest, nastiest plastic packaging is also on cheaper products. And so there is potentially a cost of living component, which shockingly, I don't think the Conservative government hugely registered when they were drafting their legislation. But to go on to that, the Conservative government giveth, and they do, of course, taketh away. Let's not even start about the various ways in which your government enabled those very same producers. I could be here far longer than the time I have going through that. But forgive me if I don't feel like, particularly this close to Christmas, that local government has any more money now than it did before your government and its policy. So yes, well done. You listened to the copious, incessant lobbying of almost everybody on the other side of the house for years and finally did something on it because you were concerned that you were losing the middle class belt in places like Waverley. Bravo. But I don't think local government is richer for the time you had in office. Madam Mayor, I am pleased to move this motion and its recommendations.
Thank you. I will read the recommendation. The recommendation is that Council resolves to 1, approve the spending on the project list for implementation as soon as is practicable, and 2, approve a supplementary estimate of £1,665,000 to be funded from extended producer responsibility funding to be spent in line with the project list detailed in Appendix 1, subject to funds being received. When lights show, please vote. "38 votes in favour with 1 abstention, so that is carried. And we move on to agenda item number 8, affordable housing strategy. Are there any questions on clarity? None. Councillor Crowe, would you like to move adoption of this, please?
Yes, I would indeed. Thank you very much. There can be little of
One minute. Do you have a seconder?
Oh, do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
There can be little of more importance than having a home. Everyone needs an affordable and healthy home, and Waverley is determined to achieve this. Having an affordable and healthy home is one of the most important factors which contribute to our well-being, enabling us to focus on other important areas of our lives such as family, education, employment, and so on. Health and well-being must be put before profits, and we all have a part to play in achieving this. The Affordable Home Strategy in front of you this evening was published for extensive public consultation on Commonplace, the Council's online consultation platform, between the 9th of June and the 21st of July this year. Views on the strategy were also sought from the ONS committees, the Landlord Services Advisory Board, the Tenants Panel, affordable housing providers and other stakeholders. You see before you tonight the results of this thorough consultation, and I ask that we approve the strategy and adopt its recommendations in full. Before I finish, I want to thank the people responsible for bringing this strategy to us, for their commitment to the vision and values of this administration. They should feel very proud of their work, and I look forward to it being delivered for the benefit of our community. Alice, Esther and team, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Your microphone's on. Councillor Townsend, would you like to reserve your right to speak? Or would you like to speak?
I'll reserve my right at this moment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Are there any speakers? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to state my thanks also to Alice Leans, Esther Lyons and all the officers who engaged with us positively in my role as chair of ONS when this came to ONS. The Conservative group recognises that housing affordability is one of the most serious challenges facing Waverley residents. Young families, key workers and local people on ordinary incomes are increasingly priced out of their communities. But good intentions alone do not build homes. This sits within the context of our borough now having a critically weak forward housing land supply of just 1.28 years. When Conservatives left power, we made difficult but necessary choices to ensure a 5-year supply and the strength of our local plan. At this low level, this council does not control development, developers do. Our policies carry reduced weight. Appeal-led development is taking over. And in that environment, the ability to secure high quality, genuinely affordable homes becomes much harder, not easier. So despite all the worthy statements in this document, this council is now structurally at risk of under-delivering. If targets are set that developers cannot viably meet, we will not get more affordable homes. We will just simply see fewer homes altogether. And that helps no one. No, not families in need and not communities. And Madam Mayor, the delivery record shown in this document gives residents every reason to be sceptical. On page 103, we see a photograph of Oxford Ridge Site C, a Waverley scheme that's 6-7 years in and still not available. Practical completion occurred nearly 18 months ago, yet these homes are still sitting empty, with rumours abounding about discussions with the developer. We note that 96% of the affordable housing delivered since 2022 has been done so by third parties, not by Waverley. So we wholly support the aspiration of this strategy. But we will judge this administration not by words in a document, but by homes delivered, infrastructure actually built, and money actually protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you. A number of points there to unpack. I'll try and do them in some order. Let us remember, of course, that in the main, developers do build housing, and the system that the previous government brought in is essentially a quasi-legal racket that allows developers to essentially offset their own development risks, particularly things like the price of land. I think it's something along the lines of 5,000 unbuilt consents. So you could argue the planning system is managing to give people, developers enough consents to crack on with it. They just for some reason aren't. And that's when you get onto the viability, the building market that we're in and all of the other issues that have led to even big housing developers go bust in relatively recent weeks. So it is in that context that Waverley is trying to build social and affordable housing. You take Oxford Ridge as an example. So when you say over 7 years, I think you're probably talking about the entire Oxford Ridge scheme as opposed to Oxford Ridge Site C specifically, because of course, many other elements of Oxford Ridge as a whole project have been delivered over the course of that period. I've said at a previous council some of the barriers to Oxford Ridge Site C, Surrey County Council being one of them in terms of the highway sign-off. And I would also put to you that many of the rumours that you referred to were in fact started or put out by members of your own party, not in this chamber. So when we come back to the actual truth of this, Oxford Ridge Site C is at least the third set of houses on Oxford Ridge, all of which have been delivered to a very, very excellent standard, with the exception, of course, of the last one that was delivered on the previous Conservative watch, which was Site D. Councillor Keel and I spent some time with residents over the last few days and also with officers talking about Site D because, of course, we're having to replace all of the doors and windows because your administration cheaped out on the delivery of Site D and did not put in particularly good infrastructure for those. It's almost like social housing is an afterthought to you. It is not to us, and we're trying to build the best quality housing we can, the best quality housing we can afford, the most sustainable housing that we can afford, to also reduce the cost to residents who are trying to live with them. I am very pleased to find that Oxford Ridge Site C is likely to be 2/3 occupied at some point early in the new year. Now, we have dealt with the issues with the county, and we've dealt with some of the outstanding issues with the contractor, and can crack on with making sure that excellent housing development is occupied. That, of course, is but one of the developments that we have been undertaking in terms of social housing delivery. Social housing delivery, not something, of course, that developers find profitable enough to actually do as a matter of course. In fact, they only do it, and only do the affordable side, when they are physically forced into doing it by policy. And even then, the policies that your government put in place put just ridiculous tension between infrastructure delivery and affordable and social housing delivery, whilst also allowing those same developers to offset the risks that they have acquired in terms of the land prices and various other elements of development, to shift them onto the state in the most inappropriate way, probably to man. So I don't believe, though, that when we took office, we did have a positive housing land supply. I'd have to confirm that. I'm not quite sure, but I don't think it was. Bearing in mind, some of the places that had been agreed in the previous local plan might not have been considered that viable. Things like the Key site in Hazelmere. I'm not quite sure how many times Mr. Hunt intervened in Dunsfold, but last time I checked, it still hasn't happened. These things, some of which are also your party locally, not just nationally, have contributed to the housing land supply in Waverley.
Thank you, Councillor Follows.
And one would imagine that the unitary housing land supply will be very interesting indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. I think it's difficult to say that there's anything that we'd really object to in this healthy homes policy that's before us. It's non-statutory, so let's hope we can make the very best of it anyway. I don't know whether other councils, Guildford is introducing one as well. Paragraph 8.1 talks about collaboration, but I don't know whether any other places in Surrey who have their own homes as well that has a strategy. The action plan is going to be considered, it says at paragraph 12.1.2, when setting the 30-year business plan in future, but that doesn't mean necessarily actions, does it? Paragraph 10.1 tells us there's priority for social rents, and there's a difficulty here because I think there's something in our SPD at the moment that we've got, our affordable housing SPD, which also does this. This should take it further. But certainly anybody who's looking at our own pet project at the moment, the 69 High Street, where the social housing that was promised in there has suddenly disappeared. There's going to be 8 or 10 social housing units, and that's becoming 13 affordable, which of course isn't affordable around here for most people, at affordable rent. It's the social rents that residents really want to be seen built, and that is difficult to do. We all know it's difficult to do, but that's what it says here. We're prioritising it, yet we're doing the opposite, and I really hope we're not going to make ourselves look like a bunch of hypocrites by going forward with our own projects without the social rents in that have been promised. It is difficult because the action plan doesn't tell us who's accountable for doing exactly what successfully by when, and what will be done differently to achieve different results from the past, of course, which is really what we all want to see. The expected achievements and outcomes, which are all listed here, are not measurable targets. I won't say they're just bluster, but they're not far above that, I'm afraid. There's a lot of words, a lot of work obviously has gone into this, and we want to see it, but will it make any difference? Will it happen? I've 20 years of looking at Waverley's policies and things. We need to make sure it does by really pressing through planning, through our policies, to ensure that we do get the social rents. We've got comments from the consultation, 28 responses, Madam Mayor. Half said they found it difficult to understand this policy, so perhaps we could look at it again in years to come to make it a little bit easier for people to understand. I don't know about other members, but I didn't find it particularly clear or concise. There's a lot of work gone into it, and I congratulate the officers for everything they've done. But we're now in a position, I think, where we should be able to bring it down to really concentrating on what we should be doing that'll make a big difference for our residents who can't afford the homes. They're not as lucky as we are. I do think that it's something where, from what other members have said, this is going to be a consideration for planning applications, but I don't think there's any weight going to be given to it, as we said, but because we're not applying the tilted balance is not applying. We can't keep on ignoring paragraphs 195 and footnote 68 of the MPPF. The tilted balance does not apply because we don't have an appropriate assessment of the mitigation for the SPA that covers the whole of the borough, gives us protection, and we've just had a training session which tells us that we've got to stick to the law and we're allowed to address it, and people have to encourage questions and have to encourage people who are questioning whether what we're doing is right. So please stop ignoring paragraph 195. We can give weight to this, we can insist on social housing, and we can turn away those ridiculous developments that we're getting coming in at the moment that are trying to take advantage of us because no one's standing up for the constraints that do protect our borough. And in which case, if we were to do that, we can have more social housing, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Affordable housing, genuinely affordable, sustainable and decent housing is something that I think Waverley does well in the most challenging of circumstances. Our borough needs affordable homes for those on lower incomes, local workers and families who might otherwise be priced out of Waverley. And I particularly welcome the ambition that's set out in the strategy that new developments deliver real affordability, reflect local need and contribute to our corporate objectives of a sustainable and inclusive borough. And in that context, I think it is such hypocrisy for the leader of the opposition to criticise Waverley's housing strategy to build genuinely affordable homes when the Conservative right to buy scheme and the failure to control the actions of developers has been the primary cause of the current housing crisis.
One moment, Councillor Austin.
Point of personal explanation, Councillor Williams has just said that I criticised the housing strategy. Very clearly I didn't, so I'm just clarifying that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologise for tarring you with that brush, Councillor Austin. However, I think it is somewhat rich to hear from avowed Conservatives that they really care about housing, because recent reforms to the right to buy, including allowing councils to retain 100% of receipts and easing restrictions on how those receipts can be used, are welcome, but must now be backed by sufficient long-term capital and grant funding so that councils aren't simply chasing their losses. Of course, I support this strategy. I think our housing team are doing an amazing job. But I would just like to raise this question and ask this question of the portfolio holder. Will you explicitly press central government for the level of investment required in social housing, not just affordable housing, so that we can actually ensure that whole swathes of people who work in Waverley, have family in Waverley, want to live in our community in Waverley, and are on lower incomes, can actually afford to live in Waverley?
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I welcome the new affordable homes strategy for 2025 to 28, but I do have some observations. Firstly, I, as a councillor, as a Conservative councillor, do care about housing and affordable housing, and I resent those who say that we do not. On page 113, Madam Mayor, of our agenda papers, the first paragraph reads, "We will build and deliver a greater number of decent, affordable homes, considering private and public land to meet local housing needs. We will double the number of new build homes that we develop as a council each year." So far, so good. Page 118 gives us a bit more detail and says that Waverley will complete 150 new affordable homes on its own land and on Section 106 sites over the 3 years of the plan. And that's 50 a year. Well, that's pretty clear. But what is Waverley's track record? The strategy actually doesn't tell us that. That's not surprising because the actual figures don't tell a very good tale. In the 3 years from April 2022 to March 2025, that's the 4th, 5th and 6th year of this Liberal Democrat-led administration, Waverley itself built just 27 new homes. That's 9 homes a year. So the target for the next 3 years is not to double that, it's to go up by rather more than 5 times. Now, we're already more than halfway through the first year of the 3-year strategy period. So where are we this year? Well, the answer is that at the end of the first half of this year, Waverley have built just 2 homes. So to catch up, Waverley needs to build more than 59 houses a year to get to its target of 150 over those 3 years. Now, I have seen some analysis of some 264 homes that might be built over the next 3 years. It looks possible, but the track record, as I've already shown, is not very good. And there is lots to do. I do note that 62 of the 264 new homes that are identified as possibly to be built are at Oxford sites C, E and F. Interestingly, of course, most of those are not actually net new homes. The style that's been adopted quite rightly is to demolish the old council homes or the old social homes and build at a greater density so that these are not net new homes. The net new homes will be considerably less than that. And of course, we've already heard about the 10 extra homes at 69 High Street. Well, we've been waiting a long time for those. I wonder how long we're going to have to wait. But the intentions are good here, but the track record is not good, and there looks to be a lot to do. The reality, of course, is that the great bulk of new homes will be built by the private sector and by social homes providers. In the 3 years to March 2025 that I mentioned earlier, while Waverley built 27 new affordable homes, the market built 639. All I can say, Madam Mayor, is thank goodness for the social providers and the private sector, even if that sector has to make a profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to briefly welcome this strategy because it reflects what I see very clearly in my ward of Chiddingfold. And I think across our rural villages, in fact, and I'm sure our towns too. Young people and families in particular often simply cannot afford to stay locally. And that has a real impact not only on themselves, but on the fabric of village life as a whole. I'm delighted that 26 new Waverley affordable homes in Chiddingfold are nearing completion. It's great actually to see the first families moving into some of those and that they'll be in their new homes in time for Christmas. I am hopeful that once the whole scheme is finished early in the new year, it will make a really big difference to the long-term vibrancy and sustainability of the village. But there obviously is more to be done, and this strategy provides a sensible and practical path to supporting more local families in the years ahead. Also really pleased to see the commitment in there to a rural housing statement. Rural areas do have their own particular challenges, and it's important we set out clearly how we're going to approach these. But overall, the very thoughtful and practical plan, which I'm very pleased to support. Thank you.
Thank you. You're going to second now. I don't see any other speakers, so Councillor Townsend, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'd also like to add my thanks to the officers for the hard work that has gone into producing this document. I'm a bit surprised that Councillor Austin has brought up a 5-year housing land supply. She seems to misunderstand what this strategy is for. This sets a framework for the delivery of the type of housing that we want to see, affordable housing that we want to see, and sets a clear line in the sand for housing providers, registered housing providers, private developers on the type of housing that we want to see. Councillor Hyman, I think you must be reading a completely different document to me because, you know, where there are targets that are measurable, they are measurable. It sets a clear timeline over 3 years. Everything's within a column. And also, I would like to say that there's also accountability in there. It says exactly who's accountable for delivering that. Councillor Martin, again, I'm not sure where you've got your figures from at all because I checked before this meeting with the housing team about the number of houses that we were delivering over this year alone, and it was approximately 94. It's already been mentioned by Councillor Busby about the Chiddingfold. We've got Oxford Ridge. We've acquired houses on Bargate Lodge, the Hawthorns, the Hine, Wheeler Street. So these are all expected to be handed over this year. So I think that, you know, we need to relook at those figures and see where you're getting your figures from.
Madam
But
Mayor,
the other
might I
part
just
of
have
the other
personal
part of
observation?
One moment, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. I do resent that. The numbers I gave were from officers and refer to the past. I did then go on to refer to the future, but the number of 2 this year to date is a number given to me by officers for houses, actually the affordable houses provided by Waverley this year to date. Thank you.
And that's why I said, Councillor Martin, we need to look at those figures, which I think I said in my speech. And so what I also need to say is that this isn't just about delivering the homes as well. As it says, this also sets out the type of homes that we want to see. We are maintaining our commitment to social rents, the most affordable form of housing, and that remains a top priority for this council. And what the other thing that we have looked at and we have taken from our consultation is clearly, and if you look at the consultation, some very, very deeply personal thoughts that were shared with us, moving accounts of the impact on people's lives of having accessible homes. That's within the policy as well, of having homes that are tenure blind and contributing to community cohesion. That's within the policy as well. Of having a fabric first approach so that we can reduce the bills of people that live in our housing, reduce those costs. So this isn't just about a 5-year housing land supply, which I'm sure we'll talk at great length about later. This is about the type of housing that we want to see. This is also about delivering homes to the people who, like our armed forces. We've included that in our affordable housing policy, making that commitment to those armed forces, making the commitment to people within adult social care. You'll see there's a whole section on that. So we have overlooked the whole ethos and meaning of this document and the strength of this document in trying to point score over a 5-year housing land supply. That doesn't come into this. You need to understand the strategy, and I'm very happy to second this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crowe, do you have anything? Do you like a right of reply?
No, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Okay, so I'll read you the recommendation. The recommendation is that Council resolves to approve the following. Adopt the Affordable Homes Delivery Strategy 2025 to 2028 entitled Healthy Homes as attached at Appendix 2 to this report. When lights show, please vote. Carried unanimously. Okay. Yeah. So we move to agenda item number 9, revisions to the inter-authority agreement. Are there any questions of clarity? No. Councillor Follows, would you like to move the adoption of this, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to propose this motion. I believe I have a seconder.
Very pleased to second, Madam Mayor. Thank
And do you reserve your right? Yes, councillor Follows.
I hope a very basic one, but we'll see. This updates the inter-authority agreement between Guildford and Waverley. Since the last revision of the IIA in 2024, both Waverley and Guildford have agreed to several shared services coming forward in the next few months. And further, since that 2024 revision, there has been a modification to some of the joint committees that we've obviously agreed to both here and in Guildford over the last few weeks and months, particularly the provision of a joint executive committee and a joint overview and scrutiny to provide governance to those shared services. These changes effectively amalgamate all of those relatively minor changes to names, changes to committees, and has been recommended for approval to full council by the Joint Governance Committee. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any speakers? Councillor Austin.
Only to comment that these absolutely reflect what's been happening, so we're all fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No. Councillor Keel, would you? No. Councillor Follows, anything
I
further?
agree, we're all fine.
So when I've read the recommendation, I beg your pardon, that council resolves to authorise the monitoring officer to enter into a new inter-authority agreement which will incorporate changes as a result of shared services and joint committees. When lights show, please vote. That is also carried unanimously. So we come to agenda item number 10, political proportionality and committee allocations. Are there any questions on clarity? No questions. So I move the adoption of this. And Councillor Follows, are you going to second?
Yes, please, second, Madam Mayor.
And do you reserve your right to
Oh,
speak?
very much so. Yeah.
And I'm not going to speak. So are there any speakers? No speakers. Councillor Follows, nothing. Councillor Austin.
Only to say that we have a position on the licensing available, if anyone would like to take it up. Thank you.
Councillor Follows, is there anything you'd like to say?
Regretfully, I can't take up that generous offer, of course. But I will say thank you to the independent members and, of course, Councillor Williams for having very reasonable and I think very fruitful for all of us discussions regarding allocations of some of those seats. And I want to thank officers for all the work that has gone into the not trivial business of having to recalculate a council of 50 councillors that's in overall control. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation is that council resolves to agree the numerical allocation of seats on committees to each political group on the council as shown in Appendix 1 to this report. 2, to agree the nominations for membership of the committees and joint committees as shown in Appendix 2 to follow in accordance with the wishes of the political groups. And 3, reaffirm the election of chairs and vice chairs of committees and relevant subcommittees as shown in Appendix 2 to follow, agreeing any new appointments therein. When lights show, please vote. That is carried 37 in favour and 1 abstention. So we move to agenda item number 11, the appointment of the Joint Strategic Director of Finance and Resources, the Section 151 officer. Are there any questions of clarity? No questions of clarity? No. Councillor Follows. would you
Madam
like
Mayor,
to-
I am pleased to move this motion and I believe I have a seconder.
I'm happy to second.
Well done, Peter. And do you reserve your right to speak?
I think I do.
Councillor Follows.
As I can confirm that there have been no material or well-founded objections from either the leader of Whaley Borough Council or Guildford Borough Council or our executives, I am very pleased to recommend to full council the unanimous decision of the Joint Senior Staffing Committees to appoint Joe Knight to the role of Joint Strategic Director of Finance and Resources, also known as our Section 151 officer. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any speakers? Councillor Martin, you'd like to speak?
I was a part of that committee and I'm obviously therefore happy to second. Thank you.
So I'll read the recommendation. You don't want to speak further?
I would only like to say very briefly my thanks to the outgoing Section 151 officer, Richard Bates, who I gather will still be around to assist in a few matters of ongoing business with LGR, but he has provided sterling work, sterling advice to both Guildford and Waverley through some troubled and difficult times, and his extremely sage and experienced position on matters of local government reorganisation in two other parts of the country have been not just a boon to this council and to Guildford, but I would actually add to all those councils who are soon to make up new unitary authorities in Surrey. And I think he's been an excellent support to the Treasurers Group and to the 151s group as they've been discussing some of the early LGR work. And I would like to record certainly my thanks, and I'm sure others, to Richard Bates for everything he has done, and I do wish him well.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. I won't repeat what the leaders just said, but which everybody will agree with, it sounds like. But I don't know anything of the and haven't met previously the proposed new Section 151 officer, but I do have it on good advice that who does know that she is very good, and so I'm happy with what's put in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll read the recommendation, which is that council resolves to that, subject to confirmation of there being no material or well-founded objections received from either council's leader on behalf of their respective executives, the appointment of Joe Knight to the role of Joint Strategic Director of Finance and Resources and Chief Finance Officer to both councils to be employed by Waverley Borough Council in accordance with the inter-authority agreement to be confirmed. When lights show, please vote. That is carried unanimously. So we come to agenda item number 12, which is the motions, and the first one is extension of support for Farnham in the name of Councillor Austin.
Section 151.
Oh, yes.
Yes, she's not until. Yes. Sorry. Yes, she's not until Guildford verifies it, but she is allowed back in the room.
Councillor Austin, and do you have a seconder?
I do have a seconder.
Pleased to say.
And you reserve your right?
I do.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our motion tonight calls for an extension of the current £1 car parking scheme implemented for the Christmas period in Farnham. Continuing now, we propose from the 2nd of January through to the 1st of March 2026 across all Waverley car parks in Farnham. We believe when businesses, shoppers and employees across Waverley need our help, we should be there to support them. In Farnham, they should not be left to temporarily carry the burden of improvements that will ultimately benefit the whole community. The Farnham Infrastructure Plan will ultimately really improve Farnham, but what we cannot ignore is the scale and duration of the disruption has impacted the town. With possibly the most disruptive element of the works ahead of us, with the closure of the borough due to commence in January for 12 weeks, Conservatives now call on members to act to protect local economic vitality. We recognise that this is an exceptional period for Farnham, and even though I'm not a Farnham councillor, I recognise when it's important to offer targeted support for the benefit of Waverley as a whole. My experience with the Bramley fuel leak, another issue completely beyond the control of local businesses, has demonstrated to me how retailers can quickly be pushed out to going out of business even without the right support at the right moment. And I do not want to see that repeated in Farnham. Last month, of course, it was Conservatives who initiated the change of sentiment to drive the present Christmas scheme, prompted by Surrey County Council's offer to remove on-street parking charges. We saw a welcome U-turn from the now almost entirely Liberal Democrat executive to agree the changes. The executive member for parking went from stating all was very well in Farnham to having a complete U-turn overnight, not the only flip-flop he had in November, then suggesting the impact was so bad to Farnham Town Council, the Farnham infrastructure work should be cancelled for 12 months. I gather few agreed. Anyway, enough of those U-turns, let's now talk about Farnham again. Conservatives have looked at a few options, but we conclude offering parking really is the best, a parking discount really is the best and most financially efficient way to benefit the most. It offers a signal to shoppers that Farnham is open for business. It helps to offset harm to footfall and encourage spend in the town. The finance team have confirmed the cost of our proposal is to be £61,000, just over. As the motion proposes, we would seek to split that cost with Surrey County Council. We would ask the executive to initiate those discussions right now. Initial discussions, our discussions with Surrey indicate they would look favourably on those conversations, and they've already looked into extending on-street parking into 2026 if Waverley are unwilling to participate in this scheme. So can we afford it? Waverley presently has general fund reserves balance of a forecast remaining balance of 3.825 million after commitments. The minimum reserve is 3.2 million. Therefore, the finance team has confirmed there is more than sufficient headroom and that is where they recommend the funding should come from, if agreed. So let's put the 30,000 into context from Waverley. Last month, Council approved an additional £540,000 for 69 High Street on top of the 2 million plus already agreed, on top of the 2.3 million purchase price, with a main reason for the recommendation continuing to be to enliven Godalming High Street. That's 5.4 million and counting on one shop for Godalming in actually the Leaders Ward. In addition, over 1.1 million additional expenditure was agreed for overspends on two other projects last month. So rather than supporting just the one cafe bar in Godalming, let's do something that will cost 180 times less and extend our support for all of Farnham at the moment that town needs it. For us as Conservatives, we recognise when targeted support is needed, and we support Farnham businesses and residents. I therefore move this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I and my fellow Farnham resident councillors thank the Leader of the Opposition and her colleagues for what we see as a genuine motion intended to help the businesses in Farnham who are being greatly impacted by the ongoing FIP works. December's car parking offer, which has been very well received by traders and residents alike, is a great example of councils collaborating across party lines and putting differences aside to work constructively together. However, I'm afraid that, and as a former hospitality business owner in Farnham, and having spoken with fellow traders, I must say that while an extension of the car parking subsidy on first glance would be very welcome, it is ultimately a blunt instrument. In January, February and March, we will face, as Councillor Austin said, major disruption whilst the Borough and the Royal Deer Junction is closed. Do we really want to encourage more cars into the town centre at that time? I am not sure we do. Therefore, I would like to propose an amendment to Councillor Austin's motion as follows, and I believe it can be shown on the screen above. Thank you. I got it. Oh, that's planning enforcement. I can read it. Thank you, Kimberly. It's quick. It's one in the middle at the top. Yeah, it's the one. Next one. Next one. Hey.
It will need to be read out as well. Okay. You just need to read it, okay?
That's it.
That's it.
All right.
That's it.
Nearly all of it. Okay. I'll read it if you, is that all right, Madam Mayor?
Yes,
Thank
please.
you. Okay. So the amendment to Councillor Austin's, I'm going to get a bit longer. Okay. It's all going well, isn't it? Okay. Council therefore resolves to call on the executive to review the evidence and validate the success of the pre-Christmas scheme in Farnham, and consider that in addition to considering extending the car parking offer in January, February and March, it works together once again with the other councils and the business community to consider creating a grant fund which can be used for more targeted support for the affected businesses in Farnham. And this could also potentially be adapted for a wider application across the borough. And thank you, Madam Mayor, and I believe I have a seconder.
Pleased to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And do you reserve your right?
I do.
Yeah. So members, Councillor Clark, I beg your pardon,
Am I okay to just accept the amendment as the proposer?
Councillor Austin.
Yes.
And that's the second. I'm
Would
happy
you
to
like?
accept it.
I'm
do
happy
that?
to accept it, and so
And that's
second.
seconded.
Yep.
Thank you. So you're in favour of the amendment. Councillor Clark.
So the amendment is now the substantive motion.
So the amendment is now the substantive motion. Councillor Clark, do you wish to speak on that?
Yes, thank you. This amendment is asking the executive to hold discussions with all three councils so it is not costed, and the allocation of any such grant is to be determined. During COVID, though, however, financial support was limited to small businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. Now, for members who are not aware of Farnham's town centre, the borough is part of the original road running from Farnham to Winchester, which was constructed in 1753. And to pay for its construction and maintenance, a turnpike was introduced. The cost of the toll was based on the number of animals pulling your wagon, and you'd be charged at 3 pence per animal, with 5 or more horses being charged 1 shilling. But no amount of toll is going to allow motorists, or indeed animals, to pass through the borough for the 3 months of January, February and March. This is when the ongoing improvements in Farnham Town Centre will enter its most critical phase, when the borough will be closed during this period, albeit a much quieter trading period than the run-up to Christmas. If I was a charitable person, I would see this motion from Councillor Orson as a genuine attempt at providing the much-needed support for the long-suffering traders who yet again are going to bear the brunt. But a car park promotion to encourage extra traffic into the town whilst the main thoroughfare is closed, I don't think is the answer. In fact, it would only exacerbate this situation. Much has been said about FIP being a programme supported by all three councils, so this council should seek to discuss with the leaders of these councils once again to put politics to one side and come up with a meaningful support package. Finally, motorists, Madam Mayor, have the freedom to alter their routines. That is a luxury the businesses do not have. They need our support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? You're reserving your right to second. Oh, you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, the amendment has been accepted. We're back
Yes.
to,
Yes.
so there is no amendment to
Yes.
discuss.
Okay, Councillor Follitt.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. First of all, can I say thank you to everybody here for accepting the amendment. I think what we're trying to do here is make sure that we reflect on the evidence coming out of the original scheme, assess whether it was effective, assess whether it actually met the objectives of all the three councils that were involved, to actually help the trade in Farnham, because there's obviously no point doing something that's actually going to make things worse or have no impact. I think it's also a good opportunity for us to actually see what sort of data does prove whether parking modifications in this way actually have an impact or not. And so that's something I've been very clear to the BID, particularly in Farnham, that we need their assistance in getting that information out. I also want to say thank you to somebody I don't normally get to say thank you to in this chamber, which is the leader of the county, Councillor Tim Oliver. I had 3 times asked Greg Stafford to try and act as an intermediary between Waverley and the county. And on the 3rd attempt, having written him a letter asking him to do the same, gave up on the subject and went straight to the leader of the county, who of course I'm speaking to quite a lot because of LGR. It seems that actually he came from a very similar position to me, both in terms of the original scheme and in terms of this one. And the county are also wanting to make sure that there's evidence to justify an extension of the scheme, and also to see whether we need to do something different, because of course what's happening in the early part of next year in Farnham is not what's happening now. So it might be that just transplanting the same scheme over for a different set of things is not appropriate. So county seemed quite happy to be able to this discussion. Your motion originally didn't include Farnham Town Council as well. I think it's obviously very important that this is discussed with Farnham. I do want to thank the leader of Farnham Town Council for ensuring that there was also funding from the Town Council as well. I think that made that a very straightforward process across the board for everybody to take on board. The other bit I just wanted to just very briefly speak on was the on-street parking scheme that Surrey was proposing. I mean, I do have significant reservations about removing enforcement from on-street parking and the unintended consequences of such a policy may have. I mean, strictly speaking, if there's no enforcement of on-street parking anywhere, can you park in front of the car park entrance? Can you just dump your car on the turning to a road? And actually, even discussing some of this with highways officers and some of the councillors at the county, I think there are some pretty serious unintended consequences of a blanket suspension of on-street parking enforcement. I certainly think an off-street parking solution is the only one that's even vaguely sensible or viable. But to go back and just copy the same scheme without looking at the evidence and without factoring in the new elements would be wrong. And it seems to be the county share my view on that as well. So thank you to everybody here for accepting this amendment, and I'm very happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman, and then Councillor William.
Thank you. Well, yes, as Councillor Clark and the leader have just said, we do need to do more actually than what is in this amendment. But I will be supporting it because what's there, the amendment and the original motion, which I thank the Conservative group for, I do think is very worthy of our support. There are many difficulties going to be faced by our retailers, but particularly business rates, of course, is a big problem. The usual post-Christmas doldrums they're going to be facing. Traffic congestion from utility works always crop up and have done and cause big problems. None of those things are within our gift. We can't do anything about those, so that we pass on that. But what we can do together is use our responsibilities and our influence that we have to give retailers the very best chance to recover after Christmas, hopefully in Farnham, from the impacts they've had so far of the implementation of the Farnham Infrastructure Programme, which of course is the subject of this motion. This is about the closure of the borough for 3 months and also the long-term congestion that will result from it. And of course, due to the sudden recent decision by the Surrey County Council leader to bring the works forward, we've all been caught out by this. Before it appears finishing the detailed plans, and certainly before bringing forward and demonstrating the detailed Pramix modelling, which would tell us the impacts of the congestions long term. We've got the impact on retailers and the shifting of the air quality problem. We all want better pedestrian conditions, of course, but Farnham always said alternative routes first. And of course, the leader of Surrey County Council sidestepped the alternative routes that were put forward. Burgrove Hill Bridge, a connection to the bypass, the things which would have solved the problems that we've been suffering. They've all been sidestepped and really it's been steamrolled, I think is the word, through with what we've got, a reduction in road space. Now, others have expressed concerns to the Farnham Board that the need for service bays and planting areas in the borough make it very little benefit actually to pedestrians. So the benefits are only marginal for pedestrians, and we really ought to be looking at this properly. I know town council officers and others, residents, have expressed concerns over the Castle Street plans, our ability to hold events in Castle Street afterwards. The problem is, as I say, you know, we're sidestepping due process here. Surrey have the right to do it, but all the decisions are made by Tim Oliver, the Surrey County Council leader. So the best thing we can do as a council, I think, is for the executive and the officers to insist now that Surrey Highways demonstrate the detailed Pramix modelling that Councillor Oliver told us has been done, as required by our air quality action plan. So that's a power that we have as at Waverley within our policy to say, we need this, we've told you about it, you haven't done it yet. We need to make an informed decision based on that. Of course, modelling isn't everything. We also need to trial it, because when it was trialled previously, as we came out of COVID, we had to remove that fast. Surrey had to do that as soon as any traffic started getting back into Farnham. The single lane in the borough completely gridlocked the town. So it's been trialled, but now we need to trial it properly, perhaps. And we should do that. Of course, this is something which a Conservative group here can help us, because Mr. Oliver hasn't listened to us, Councillor Oliver. If through the MPs, if necessary, see if we can revert to the original schedule, finish the design and modelling and trial before we go forward with what could be absolutely disastrous, not just in the short term, but in the long term. So let's have the things we were originally promised, please. Please, can the Conservative group sort out your people at Surrey? They are the issue here. We want the modelling, a trial. We must ensure that Farnham remains accessible. This is a great amendment that's been put into a great motion, but please do your part properly.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to be fairly brief. I think this is a motion now with the amendment, which is a motion that is supporting the adoption of evidence-based policy. And I think that is something which actually is something that we need more of. You know, we've talked about parking charges till the cows come home on this council, and I have never seen any empirical evidence that cutting parking charges has a positive impact on footfall and a positive impact on businesses. If we want to support businesses in Farnham, and they need the support of this council, it needs to be the right kind of support for the right reason. And just while we are talking about parking charges and this obsession that people have with their motor vehicles. Councillor Beeman did ask a question earlier on this evening relating to the use of hopper buses to encourage and enable members of the community to access town centres like Farnham. And actually, it's public transport that is the potential way to unlock the access to our town centres for so many of our residents. So perhaps that's another issue, perhaps that's a bit of a digression, but as I say, I'm really pleased to see that we are now talking about a motion that is about adopting evidence-based policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goodridge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm obviously very much in favour of the original motion and also now as amended. I mean, the purpose of reducing car parking charges is to encourage people, despite the problems, to still trade and come and visit Farnham, because that's the whole purpose, is to try and encourage people to come, make it viable and attractive to visitors. The bit I don't agree, therefore, with is remarks that have been made whereby people should be encouraged not to drive their cars into Farnham between January and March. They should be encouraged. They should be encouraged to support the traders. So any message that we're coming from this council to say, avoid Farnham like the plague between January and March should not be the right message. The message should be, please try and visit Farnham still try and support your traders and to minimise the impact that is suffered by them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking as one of the ward members for Western Villages. I certainly support the motion and its amendment. I think it's a good thing that this council, in conjunction with other tiers of local authorities, should take targeted action where it's necessary, and clearly in Farnham it is. But it does set a precedent. I haven't known this sort of funding being made available in these circumstances throughout the borough. And if it is a precedent, why should Farnham necessarily be the only settlement in the borough that benefits? I do accept, and I'm not going to ask, but and I wouldn't get it, that a fund be set up at this stage for the whole of the borough. But having set a precedent for Farnham, I would ask the executive to consider extending this as a matter of principle on the grounds that if there are struggling businesses elsewhere in the borough, rural and urban, large or small, then we should not close our doors to giving the same sort of targeted support there that we have in our larger settlement. Not immediately. I'm not holding my hands out for money, but just keep it in the back of your mind, please.
Thank you. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very happy to support this amended motion. I happen to be the Surrey councillor for Central Farnham, and I do agree with the comments of Councillor Munro and Councillor Goodrich, actually, that first of all, it's nice to see it as an idea that can help the whole of Waverley, not just Farnham. I think that makes it more acceptable to everybody in the council. And I also agree with Councillor Goodrich that people will come into the town regardless of whether we want them to or not, according to their own requirements. It happens to be that and one of my other colleagues, the councillor for North Farnham, happens to be a retailer in Central Farnham, and she's pointed out that the first 3 months are the quietest period of the year, so that's a good thing in terms of this disruption happening at that time. The other thing I'd like to comment on is I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about Tim Oliver's suggestion. He was actually suggesting suspending the parking charges on the on-street parking charges where there are parking meters in Central Farnham. He wasn't suggesting
suspending parking restrictions altogether in Central Farnham. You can't actually do that by law. All of the restrictions still exist where there's yellow lines and notices up about restricting parking. They still exist. His suggestion was suspending the parking charges in the parking charged areas. But I don't actually think that's a very good idea, because if we suspended them completely, these places would just be used by commuters and town centre workers and so on, which wouldn't help local traders at all. So in summary, I certainly support this motion. I think it's very well thought out and an improvement on the initial motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I think there are two other speakers, Councillor Beeman and then Councillor Fairclough. Councillor Beeman.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would say that I fully support this motion, of course, but I am concerned about the effect of closing the borough and the Broadley Junction on the operation of bus services in the town, which could provide some alternative service, because effectively every service uses either that junction or that road. And at the moment, I do not believe there's any agreement over any diversionary routes in place, actually. So I think that's an area of great concern. And on a general point, I would say that if the traders, think that, well, there will be some effects on traders inevitably arising from this closure. It will be disruptive. But I hate to think of the disruption that might be caused on traders arising from the consequence of the budget of increasing business rates.
Thank you. Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to reassure Councillor Munro, the final line of Councillor Murray's revised amended motion, I should say, does make specific reference to the fact that having considered what we're doing in Farnham and, as Councillor Williams has pointed out, considering the evidence of what's happened from a scheme that hasn't actually started yet. It starts next week tonight. Yeah, the 9th. We will not only look at what's happened in Farnham, but learn lessons from it and see what can be done exactly as you've said, Councillor Munro, to see where we can adapt it or utilise it for other towns and villages in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers, so Councillor Martin, you reserved your right.
That's very kind. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Of course, we are looking at a recommendation to the executive in line with our session this evening on how we look after ourselves at these times. I would just say that I do welcome the amendment, which it widens the scope of the motion that we put forward. So I think that's good. I think it's never a good time, is it, to have major roadworks in your town, whether it was the middle of winter, the middle of summer, whenever a time is suggested, it never comes at a, quotes, good time. But it's important that this council does offer its support to both businesses and to residents, and we can do that in a targeted way. I think parking charges are important. We'll see, and yes, let's look at the results in December. In reply to Councillor Williams, I think there's considerable evidence that reducing parking charges increases footfall. Just look at the supermarkets. They benefit by offering free parking. If they weren't to offer free parking, they wouldn't get the footfall. I think there's a very clear relationship between how much you pay for your parking and what the level of business is to businesses in a town like Farnham and elsewhere. So my view, the best way to give the maximum benefit to both residents and to businesses is to take down the parking charges. I do understand the issues about maybe not wanting to bring too many people in, but if the position is so bad with the closing of the junction at Borough, the junction that you mentioned, if it's so bad, then people just won't come, whether the parking charges are reduced or not. And so I still think that the parking charges will in the end be the best way to do it. But I'm happy to rely now. We've sent a clear message to people that this is what we want to do, and then the executive will look at it, and I'm sure we can encourage them to take the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you. And just thank you, everybody, to your contributions to this motion as amended. Thank you, Councillor Murray. I think what's important here is that the principle of financial support, additional financial support of some kind, has been in principle agreed by this council tonight, and our support as a borough for Farnham is agreed. And I personally think that that is the biggest takeaway from tonight. I just want to roll through a few points here. Evidence-based, what does that actually mean? Because let's just think about what we're trying to achieve here. What we're actually trying to achieve is supporting our residents in their their businesses in their trade, and making sure that shoppers make the decision to go to Farnham to shop. Now, that's very hard to measure in terms of what you're going to you're going to measure it on parking, how much parking people have booked. What you actually should be measuring is the sentiment of businesses. I would suggest that needs to be the thing, as what happens in December, whether they think it's a success or not. I would also just put a bit of a question mark. I'm afraid my Bramley fuel leak experience is, sadly, I do know about this now, that £30,000 split between a few hundred shops and businesses will not get you very far. There are apparently 600 to 700 businesses and shops in Farnham. Well, £30,000 split between that'd be £100 each. So that's why the point of parking is the thing that, for the least amount of money, you can have the maximum amount of impact. That's the whole reason why. I would also, just to support what Councillor Goodridge said, we absolutely need to be welcoming people to Farnham. Most of the car parks are on the periphery of Farnham, and they won't be impacted to a certain extent by that, by that closure. And I totally accept and agree Councillor David Munro's point about setting a precedent. I am still upset, actually, that we didn't get more support for my village at a time when we really needed it. Now, if we look and turn to, and on that point, actually, each business needs to be encouraged to apply for a rates discount. They need to do that individually. And I fully think our council needs to support them in that process as much as we possibly can. And just on terms of what Councillor Tim Oliver and the county have said, I mean, they are happy. Thank you, Councillor MacLeod, for clarifying. They're absolutely happy to work on the basis of a metered discount next year. That's what they suggested originally. So thank you for clarifying that we're not suggesting a free-for-all in Farnham by any sense. But the point is that the county have initiated that support, and they're happy, I believe, in principle to agree it. And I hope the executive will continue those discussions now. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you, and I can now commend this motion. Let's vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So when lights show, please vote. That is carried 38 votes for with 1 abstention. And we'll just take a little tiny break till 9 o'clock so that you can stretch your legs, because there's a little bit more yet ahead of us. Okay? So I'll bring that down now. We restart with the second motion, the National Housing Targets and the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. And this is submitted by Councillor Liz Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I believe I have a seconder.
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And do you reserve your right to speak?
I'll go now if you like.
Well,
But Liz hasn't had a shot yet.
no. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are now facing the most challenging planning environment this borough has ever seen. As members will know, our housing allocations had already risen under the previous government from the 590 homes we had planned for in our local plan to 710. And then in December 2024, the new government more than doubled that figure again to approximately 1,440 homes per year. That is an unprecedented increase, and one which makes it impossible for Waverley to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. As we know, when we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, the tilted balance is engaged, which in simple terms means the scales tip in favour of approving planning applications, making large speculative development far more likely and undermining our ability to plan for growth sustainably. These numbers are quite simply unreasonable, and over the next 20 years we would have to build the equivalent of a new Godalming and a new Farnham. So how did we get here? The government's new standard method begins with a baseline figure and then adds a very significant uplift based on local affordability. In Waverley, the average home now costs nearly 17 times the average annual salary. That results in an uplift of more than 300% to our housing number. We have already presented independent evidence from Iceni showing that increasing housing delivery does not automatically reduce house prices, but that evidence has been ignored by government. A second fundamental flaw in the national approach is its total failure to account for environmental and policy constraints. Around 80% of Waverley is covered by the Surrey Hills National Landscape and the Green Belt. Yet none of this is factored into our housing calculation. The government's figures assume all land is equally available and unconstrained, and it becomes the council's job through a lengthy and resource-heavy local plan process to prove otherwise. There is no flexibility, no phasing, no recognition of national landscape designations, and no allowance for market conditions. And that brings me to a long-standing frustration that councils are judged not on the number of planning permissions we grant or have granted in the past. We've already mentioned earlier about the number of planning permissions we have unbuilt, about £5,500. Only planning permissions are within our control, but we are judged on the number of houses that developers deliver, which is not within our control. Most housing in this borough is brought forward by private developers who understandably build based on market conditions. And we are now in a housing delivery slump. Completions have fallen to a 9-year low, down about 6%, and that equates to just over 208,000 in the year to March 2025, and the actual target nationally is 370,000. Developers themselves are citing rising costs, regulatory burdens, and market uncertainty, and they are saying they cannot fulfil these targets. And yet our targets, this council's targets, remain rigid, and we are expected to press on as if nothing is happening. This system is simply not working. It encourages speculative development with minimal infrastructure, and it creates understandable frustration among our residents. People have lost faith in the planning system to actually plan. They see sites we've allocated sitting undeveloped, brownfield land untouched, and yet another green site approved on appeal, all because of the relentless pursuit of a rigid 5-year housing land supply figure, and with no powers for the council to accelerate build rates or make developers complied with previously agreed phased development stages. If the government truly wants councils to plan for growth, then it must provide more support to those councils that are doing exactly that. It must recognise that infrastructure takes time to deliver and that highly constrained areas like ours with extensive protected landscapes need fair, flexible and realistic targets. The UK is already one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. It makes no sense to ignore the value of our protected landscapes or to force disproportionate amounts of development into the remaining 20% of our countryside. And let us be clear, the remaining countryside beyond the green belt should not be seen as an open target for development simply because it lacks a particular label. Rural villages were never intended to shoulder large-scale growth at the expense of their character or their capacity to accommodate what are disproportionate numbers. And that is why this motion matters. It is not anti-housing, it is pro-good planning. It calls for a fair system, one that recognises that councils grant permissions but do not control delivery, one that reflects the realities of a highly constrained rural borough, respects environmental limits and links phased growth together with the infrastructure needed to support it. So I would therefore urge members to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers, Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be supporting this motion. There is much of what Councillor Townsend that has just said that I agree with, and I don't often say that. But I do so with deep frustration because I'm concerned firstly, as to why Waverley hasn't already strenuously written to MHCLG on this issue. The housing numbers were doubled a year ago. You don't need to wait 12 months for a motion to be agreed by council to take action. Second, because this motion has played, this administration has played a major part in creating this crisis it now complains about. Let's be absolutely clear. I said it earlier, Waverley is in a planning emergency. This decision to double housing targets is deeply damaging, takes no meaningful account of environmental and infrastructure constraints we face. But we must be honest about how we arrived at this position. In 2018, the Conservative administration had secured a forward housing supply of 5.8 years. When we left office in 2019, we had a 5.3-year forward housing land supply. That meant we were protected from speculative development and in control of where development and growth happened. We made difficult choices, but they were responsible ones. Since then, that position has steadily eroded under the Liberal Democrat-led administration. By last year, our housing supply had fallen to just 3 years. That was before the Labour government doubled our housing targets. But we were nowhere near meeting them anyway. Now that responsibility falls with this administration's failure to react and put in place the correct conditions for delivery. The Conservative group saw this coming. Years ago, we proposed a light touch update to the local plan that would have preserved our 5-year supply, that would have kept the council in control because we would have had an up-to-date plan. That proposal was rejected. Instead, the administration chose a full local plan review. And that means our local plan will not be adopted until the minimum July 2028, condemning Waverley to 3 more years of vulnerability. In practice, this is 3 more years where developers will win on appeal, 3 more years of housing approved in the wrong places, 3 more years without the infrastructure, affordable housing. It means outdated policies carrying little weight and thousands upon thousands of Waverley's money wasted on planning appeals instead of being invested in our communities. Our MPs understand the crisis and they are working to address it. I joined Jeremy Hunt and Gregory Stafford at a meeting 2 weeks ago with the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, on another Waverley crisis, the Sill scandal. At the end, we discussed housing numbers. The Housing Minister expressed grave concern that our housing supply number had been allowed to fall so low, and he asked, quite reasonably in my view, why Waverley still has 3 years until an inspector will be able to see a new plan and scrutinise those housing numbers. He made the point that local authorities should not wait until their local plans are essentially out of date before replacing them. So I will support this motion because our environmental constraints are real and because government should recognise them. But our residents deserve decisive leadership, not delay followed by complaint. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I strongly support this motion, which raises a number of issues beyond the simple target. In Haslemere specifically, we have a major problem, because in addition to our requirement to build housing, we also have an obligation in terms of our local plan and our neighbourhood plan to protect our green spaces, national landscape and green belt. The fact of the matter is that in Haslemere, there is virtually no land already unallocated that is not protected as either national landscape or green belt. And that then leaves us the question is, where on earth are we to put the new housing? Quite before we think about the increase in the target. If we are to preserve all our greenbelt land and as a borough meet any kind of housing target, effectively means we have to put those new houses in the areas that are not currently protected. And if you look at a map, as we've seen in the consultation on the new local plan, those unprotected areas effectively are on the outskirts of Farnham on the one hand, or in the east around Cranley and Affold. I don't think those areas would be particularly happy to accept all the Haslemere land. What this means, in my view, is that we also really need to think hard about our entire approach to planning. In my time on the planning committee here and previously in Haslemere, I've seen too many instances where we have given all our attention to protecting the character of the area, as well as protecting, obviously we have to protect the land greenbelt where we can. But I've seen applications refused, not refused, but referred back because it was not perfect. It was not exactly what we wanted, and applications referred back for further asking the developers to rethink. It's not up to us in the planning committee to look for the perfect. We need to consider applications as they are. That's a digression which really is for the planning committee, but I just raised that. To come anywhere near meeting our targets, even before the increase, we really need to make some compromises. One of those, I think, will be on how we assess the applications before us. And the other one is we are going to have to consider how do we balance the need for more housing and protecting our green spaces. My view, accepted last week in the Haslemere Town Council, is we're going to have to think hard about densification, increasing the densities, and infill alone is not going to help it. That means higher buildings, which will change the character of the towns. We cannot protect the green space and meet the housing need and preserve the character of the towns. We have to make compromises. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 4 other speakers, Councillors Hess, MacLeod follows, and then Williams. Councillor Hess.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think it's right to blame this administration for a Labour government doubling the housing targets. That's just thrown the whole system up in the air. It's just not helpful. We shouldn't be playing the blame game here. The speech just given by Councillor Townsend was spot on and covered the subject comprehensively. The current situation is a green light for speculative developments, and we've seen it happening already. And be aware, colleagues, the situation created by central government threatens the density and character of our beautiful towns in Waverley. And therefore, I'll be supporting the motion and hope colleagues will do so also. Do so also? Also do so. Get it right. Thank you.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too strongly support the motion, and I thought Councillor Townsend gave a very good speech, actually, explaining the council's current problems. I'd just like to add a few comments to them, though. When I was first a councillor, Waverley used to produce about 250 houses a year, and that's what went into the first local plan, which was rejected by the planning inspector. Then the number went up to 590, and that was a local plan that was accepted when we had to accept 90 additional houses to help Woking with their unmet need. Subsequently, again, under a Conservative government, the calculation took us up to the 710. And it was that made it absolutely impossible to meet this 5-year housing supply. After the number went up to 710, there's no point in blaming Waverley. That number was unachievable. And even more unachievable is the calculation that the Labour government brought in last December, which increased the number to 1,450, which is a 104% increase. And to put that increase in context, if you look at the national figure, the national requirement went up from 300,000 to about approximately 330,000, which is a 23% increase. So how can Waverley be required to produce 100% increase in housing numbers when the national target is 23%? It's just totally out of context, and it's totally impossible, actually. We're being asked to produce something that's absolutely impossible. And I would suggest to the executive that they've written a very good letter to the minister, and they should go ahead with that. But I think they should also do an analysis of what's happening in terms of the way the numbers going up, because planning is very difficult and very expensive thing to do. And we have to spend a lot of money in Waverley on our planning activities. It's difficult to get planning policy officers. There's a national shortage. We have to pay all these outside experts to give us special advice. We have to deal with Surrey County Council and highways. We have to deal with all the infrastructure suppliers. It's a very big, complex operation. And I don't know if the housing minister that Councillor Austin was talking to knows much about planning, because if he thinks it can be done more quickly, he's absolutely wrong. If you're going to plan properly, it's a complex operation, and it's got to be done properly. But the unfortunate thing is, because of this ridiculous target we're being saddled with, a lot of our effort will be wasted, actually. And that doesn't just apply in Waverley. There's a whole load of other councils, particularly in the South East, that have got unrealistic targets. So the government ought to be made to understand that they're causing councils to waste a great deal of money on trying to plan for something that's completely impossible. So I'm rather depressed by the whole affair, really. And I think the planning system is essentially broken. And it started being broken in about 2010, when the then Conservative government abandoned regional planning, because planning really ought to be done on a regional basis. And handing it down to borough councils, you're giving them an impossible task. They can't deliver houses, they don't build houses, they don't deliver infrastructure and so on. So the whole structure is completely wrong, completely broken. And I think we should be actually tackling not just the government about the land problems we have, but all these problems surrounding the way things are calculated and so on. Because the whole system is just ridiculous. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'll acknowledge that the Leader of the Opposition has agreed to support the motion, but I also agree with Councillor Hess that Councillor Townsend has covered all the bases eloquently. To be clear, action has been taken repeatedly to about 7 different incarnations of MHCLG and ministers, about 4 different prime ministers, now to 2 different governing parties over certainly the 6 or 7 years I've been a councillor. I'm reluctant to give a full history lesson to people that haven't been here that long. But we saw what happened when a Waverley administration rushed through a botched local plan. I believe it was 2017-18, when an inspector threw out that plan on the very first day of the assessment as being completely and utterly unrealistic. And so to say that anybody on this side of the chamber has delayed or taken too long over a local plan, what we've had to do is actually think about what we submit properly and seriously, and not just shove in something unrealistic and hope that an inspector suddenly has a blank that day and lets it go. I also think we're now in a position where, because of the local government reorganisation processes, we now need to protect Waverley for as long as possible through a new local plan. So it is essential that we carry on through that process, and the government have issued yet more changes to that structure that we're going to have to incorporate into what we're doing. Councillor McLeod, as Councillor McLeod has alluded to, it's worth also noting that the housing delivery test numbers only actually started to pick up after the Conservatives left office in Waverley. But actually, I always find that argument slightly ridiculous anyway. Like a borough council actually has levers to move one way or the other what a large housing developer does. I mean, so, you know, we can say we did this, you can say you did that. Actually, we have no levers. And actually, my main issue is that we have no levers to really adjust this. We have no levers over developers. We can't make them do anything. Otherwise, they'd have built the 5,000 houses they've got consent for, and we wouldn't have a housing delivery test issue, except we still would because they've doubled the numbers. I would also suggest to the Leader of Opposition that she might wish to speak to her employer, the Right Honourable Sir Jeremy Hunt MP, to explain his actions in 2008 regarding Dunsfold. I actually recall the press release specifically where he welcomed the call to the Secretary of State and opposed the development happening, which was and remains one of the few genuinely bit of brownfield sites at scale in the entirety of Waverley. And I'll just conclude by saying I further agree with Councillor McLeod that this is depressing, because we have a version of this every few months. The wider system is thoroughly broken, but we have a duty, I think, to continuously and periodically lobby every government, every minister, every local government secretary, every housing secretary, every single one of them, in the hope, the forlorn hope, I expect, that they will finally understand the issues with the planning system and do something about it. So I again support these recommendations from Councillor Townsend. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We have 4 other speakers. It's coming up to 9:30. I'm just reminding everybody. Councillor Williams, Councillor Goodridge, Councillor Hyman, Councillor Denis. Councillor Williams.
I think many councillors have highlighted the sheer fantasy of Waverley's housing target, and I won't labour that point. Some of us, I think, have pointed out, and I think we need to make it clear, that in requesting a review of our housing target, we are not anti-housing. We are not opposed to more genuinely affordable housing. What is needed, and I think we do need to make this clear in our communication with ministers, what is needed is a recognition that setting crazy targets is not the best way to get the right sort of housing in the right places. I think Councillor Weldon made a very valid point talking about minimum density requirements. That is one way to get the right sort of houses built. And I think Councillor Follows absolutely hits the nail on the head when he talks about the need to actually control developers and stop the unbridled role of developers as we have now. I mean, the government has got a target of 1.5 million homes, and that's where we get these crazy targets from. And yet, local authorities, you know, we've got over 1 million unoccupied homes in England alone, and yet local authorities have limited powers to possess those homes that remain unoccupied. We've got developers that have secured planning permission for over 1.4 million homes that have not been built. And when right to buy sales continue to reduce the number of available social homes, while new construction is insufficient to compensate for the loss, we are onto a loser. I think we need to be very clear that we're not anti-housing. We are pro the right kind of housing, and it's not going to come about as a result of these crazy, crazy targets.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support this motion and the problems that this borough has, and in particular, in fact, the villages. I'm aware of the pressures on villages, and especially the village in which I live of Wannish. I'm aware that in the last 2 weeks, developers have been writing to landowners in the village, saying that Waverley hasn't got its can't meet its housing targets, and therefore your land is ripe for development, despite the fact that it's green belt, area of outstanding natural beauty, and all the protections that are there. Developers are seeing the opportunity of trying to persuade people who own land around villages outside the envelope of the village to develop them. And anything that can be done to stop that would be welcome. The problem we have in this borough is infrastructure. Now, most infrastructure you can throw money at. You need more doctors, surgeries, more schools. You just throw money and you build it. One thing that you can't throw money at and get a solution is our road network. And the roads at the moment are to capacity. And that is a practical problem in us being able to put anything near the target that the government have suggested. I don't want to tell our leader anything about history, but I recall, and I was on the council when we first put forward a local plan, and it was led by the Liberals at the time. They were the ones, from my recollection, that had a problem in it being thrown out. But, you know, that doesn't matter so much. It's the problem we have now. And I think now's problem could have been alleviated somewhat if the decision we took in 2023 to have a full go at doing another local plan instead of a light touch local plan. We'd done that, we could have had a local plan in place now with a figure that the inspector had looked at instead of waiting probably till 2028. So I fully support this. There's pressure on towns, there's pressures on villages, and I'm aware of the pressures in respect of my village, and I'm sure I speak for other councillors who are in a similar situation. So I will be supporting this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we've heard a bit of anger about this from people who the situation we're in. The planning system's broken. It's a ridiculous situation. It's depressing. It doesn't have to be. The problem's right here. You've heard, Madam Mayor, in this chamber over many years, ever since 2005, in fact, that I've been pressing for this council to abide by the law that gives protection to this borough, because we have got environmental designations as at point 3 on page 187, the motion. They're asking the government that environmental designations are not undermined. That's up to us. It's us. It's the people in this chamber who have the choice. They can decide now, Merry Christmas to everybody. We're going to be candid about this. We're going to admit we don't have an appropriate assessment of the mitigation, and we can stand up to the planning inspectorate. We have the right to be able to stand up for our own borough. And for 20 years, everybody else except myself in this chamber has been turning around and saying we're going to turn a blind eye because it's inconvenient. Everybody in this chamber has been completely misled. They think that obeying the law, applying the constraints properly, means no development. And how ridiculous is that? We simply can't do it. We don't have to. It would be ridiculous. That's not what the law says. The law requires evidence based decision making. It requires the evidence to be put forward, and the proportionality principle requires a limitation. Of course, there's a lot of people who don't want any limitation on development. I thought this chamber might like the idea of a limitation on development. Isn't that what this motion's about? But no, the elephant in the room isn't here in this paper yet again, is it? We've got 1.5 million planning permissions unbuilt around that, and, which will satisfy what the government wants. We shouldn't be embarrassed to stand up and say, well, actually, if the evidence says we can only build a small amount of houses until we can prove that mitigation is effective, then hey, that's the situation. That is the situation we're in. We can stand up and say, well, okay, we'll allow social housing, we'll allow affordable housing, we'll allow a smaller bit of housing where it's needed, where it's right, according to the limitations of Article 6.4 of the directive. The solution is in our hands here. We don't need this proposal, this motion. We don't need to keep ignoring the elephant in the room. We don't need to be in denial. All we need, give everybody a happy Christmas and the endangered species by admitting we don't have an appropriate assessment of the mitigation proposals. We have to stand up to government and to the planning inspectorate and all the people with vested interest, lawyers, all the people who actually have been proven wrong by the courts, because the courts have determined at the very highest level, see 32317, people over Wind and Sweetman, determined that the government, Natural England, the lawyers, all of the council's approach is unlawful. That's fact. That's there in the National Planning Policy Guidance, the MPPG, practice guidance, sorry, MPPG. It's there in the law. It's in footnote 68 of the National Planning Policy Framework 2024, which we're meant to be using. It's at paragraph 195. The tilted balance does not apply to us. We still have protection. Why can't people simply turn around and admit it, do their homework, and instead of coming up with all this, which is great, and we'd all like to support it, but it's not there. It's ignoring the real issue that the problem is right here in this room and with the people who are giving us advice, and we need to stand up to that, and people need to do their work properly, stand up for the residents, stand up for the environment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hyman. Councillor Austin, you had something.
May I move? I believe we've got indication from a lot of the room they'll be voting for it. May I move that we put the motion to a vote?
Proposal still has to sum up.
Can I sum up? Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know we all want to move on, and thank you to members for their support. I do have to challenge one point. There is no such thing as a light touch approach to a review of a local plan. That is not possible, and I'm quite happy to speak to members that think that was possible. We had a housing number that had changed so much that our local plan, with advice from the Planning Advisory Service, which is a government-funded body, and that government at the time was the Conservative government, we had complete advice, and that was brought to this council to say that due to the numbers and other changes in the MPPF, there was no possibility to do a simple review. That wasn't possible, and it's wrong to try and lead people to think that was possible at the time. We had to do a new local plan, and that is what we went forward with. And the other thing is that people don't remember, and you know, I know we've said it a few times, but splitting the local plan up into local plan part 1, which was adopted in 2018, and then local plan part 2, which was pulled from this council with no notice, and then took until 2023 to be adopted, did this council no favours. It did it no favours. That delay meant the first part of our local plan was out of date almost when the second part was adopted. So you just have to know that that actually does cause issues. We committed straight away to then looking at the local plan. As you've said, 2023, we looked at it. So, you know, we have tried our best, and you know, talking to government ministers, I'm afraid they admit that it takes 30 months plus 4 months notice to deliver a local plan. That's what they know. That's what they have issued. So them saying, well, why don't they do it a bit quicker, these little councils, you know? Well, We can't do it quicker. We have to do so many studies. We have to look at so many documents. We have to provide that evidence, because without that evidence base, we have not got a leg to stand on. And the local plan is the only mechanism that we have in order to reduce our numbers down or create a more reasonable number that we may be able to deliver. We cannot justify lower numbers without the local plan. And, you know, and Councillor Hyman, we have got an appropriate assessment. Natural England found our approach, who are the statutory consultee, correct. We had council opinion in this place about people over wind, and you know, I know that that isn't acceptable to you, but we did take every single step to investigate what Councillor Hyman had said many years ago. The elephant's no longer in the room. The elephant has left the room a long time ago, I'm afraid. So I think I do welcome all your support, but we do have to know that history has a long, long tail, and you know, we are still coping with mistakes that were made, but we are looking forward. We're trying our best, but we do need government to acknowledge and to recognise how their planning policies actually work on the ground, and especially in rural boroughs that are 80% covered by constraints. And that is going to create a huge issue, as has been said, with speculative development, as Councillor Goodridge mentioned. With speculative development, we probably haven't seen, you know, the end of that at all. So thank you for your support. We will write to, and we have written before, to government ministers, and also our officers are also raising this issue direct with MHCLG. We're not just working in this little vacuum here. You know, there is much, much more that's done outside of this chamber. And thank you, Madam
Point
Mayor.
of personal explanation, if I may. I apologise if the portfolio holder misheard or misunderstood what I said, but what I said is that we don't have an appropriate assessment of the mitigation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hyman. We're going to move
And if she could provide me with such,
when
that
the
would be
lights
great.
show. You're all being recorded. Thank you. Yes, that is carried 37 in favour with 1 against. So we come now to the third motion, which is in the name of Councillor Follows. It's 20 to 10.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Noting the time, I'm pleased to propose, and I believe I have a seconder. So thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased, before I get to the substance, I just want to briefly recap where we are on local government reorganisation, also known as LGR, of course. It seems absolutely crazy to say this, but it was actually less than a year ago, well, pretty much a year ago at this point, when the new government kicked off LGR, something that was not in their manifesto. And a few weeks later, Surrey County Council decided that they would leap into this process, a process opposed by almost the entire opposition at Surrey itself and by almost all of the districts and boroughs of Surrey. The 2-bid unitary bid led by SCC was submitted, as was a 3-bid unitary bid led by 9 districts and boroughs, of course, including this one. The government made its decision, and as mentioned at the start of this meeting, we're now at the point of establishing voluntary governance arrangements to progress the creation of that 2 unitary solution, East and West, and these are referred to as the joint committees. Now, this brings us up to date. And I think now, as I think most of the other leaders in Surrey agree, we have a duty to step up and make the best of the decision for our residents, which is why I've only spent a 30-second bit on that bit of the history. My motion seeks to address a serious issue that I believe impacts both Waverley and the new West Surrey, and that's the financial sustainability of the new council. There is a serious and significant disparity in the financial sustainability and therefore the prospects of those new unitaries. And something that has actually taken me by surprise is quite how acutely aware most residents are of this. And it starts with debt. Now, not all debt is bad, but let's face it, a lot of the debt held in Woking, Spelthorne, Runnymede and Surrey County Council itself in particular is bad. And unsustainable debt is debt not backed up by income coming in the door. Now, debt in Surrey is weighted approximately 5-1 west to east. So almost £5 billion of debt sits with the new West and about 800 million only sits in the east. The government have said there will be no other intervention in any debt anywhere else. And 500 million is, for Woking is of course welcome, but it's simultaneously the largest local government bailout in the history of the United Kingdom and at the same time grotesquely insufficient. But there are also other areas where there are clear concerns. We're seeing very large budget gaps in almost all of the districts and boroughs of Surrey and of course the county itself. £21 million gap at Surrey County Council. We've seen an £11 million gap in Spelthorne. These are both several million more adverse than the previous projections of those councils and crucially, much more than was presented in the unitary bid numbers by the county council. Residents will also see harmonisation of council tax and fees and charges, which likely will see essentially stealthy rises of a number of things. And I'll use one example. Waverley don't charge for parking on Sunday. Everywhere else in the unitary territory does, and these things are usually harmonised around the higher end of the charging sheet. So fees and charges are something we have to take note of. Now, two factors are conspiring to cause a real and foreseeable issue, in my opinion. The plan that the government has adopted is one drafted by Surrey. Not on audited accounts, but prospective financial information based on assumptions. Now, in the private sector, it would be utterly inconceivable that somebody would make this kind of decision with this level of fundamental change in financial commitment without some kind of independent analysis about the assumptions that have gone into those projections. Now, the government obviously didn't do that until far too late, if they did it at all. Now, beneath that lack of entry-level financial practice to go through those assumptions, test the reasonableness, and in some cases look at the basic mathematics underlying it, they have allowed these positions to be put forward as fact. And we're going to be in a seriously bad position because the government think those are now the numbers. Now, if you take the SCC numbers as presented in their bid, hidden in plain sight is that eye-watering future burden for the residents of West Surrey. Now, how have they calculated this? Well, the impact on council taxpayers using their numbers is something akin to an additional £1,000 per taxpayer, if not addressed, per year. And so left unremedied, the Western Unitary is likely to go into severe deficit within only a few short years. It is actually shocking that the government just accepted this without further validation. The government has also made no real changes to the structure of local government funding. They promised they would do some of it in their manifesto. They've done almost none of it. And the budget this week has confirmed there's almost no other changes for local government finance. It is clear to everyone, I think, almost at this point, across party, that the present funding for local government is grotesquely insufficient. I only need to point to the complete unsustainability of things like the SEN and children's services and adult social care. Services, by the way, that we will be attached to and in the process will completely eliminate the discretionary spend that Waverley has been so jealously guarding so that it can help its residents. This motion asserts that an accurate evidence-based assessment of the true and current position of West Surrey finances must be submitted to the government as soon as possible to request and justify not only further intervention, but to ensure that when the fair funding review takes place, it does not compound the existing financial sustainability concerns by using poor numbers, unfounded assumptions, and just issues that, frankly, everybody else, it seems, other than the government and the county, seem to take as fact. Without this urgent review, the government will continue to base both its perceptions and, much worse, actual decisions on the fair funding review on those faulty numbers, creating a West Surrey that breaks its duty to be safe and legal on day one, and in very short time after, is broken in almost every other way. Madam Mayor, I'm pleased to move this motion to council.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak now. If I could, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems like your Christmas jumper appeal seems to have brought an early feeling of seasonal goodwill in the chamber this evening. Well, as they say, a week is a long time in politics, and I must admit I'm as surprised as many of you are to find myself seconding a leader's motion today. Exactly. However, as a potential candidate for the upcoming unitary election, I naturally have a strong interest in ensuring that the structures and foundations of the Shadow Authority are in the best possible shape they can be. An accurate, transparent and evidence-based assessment, which I'm sure Councillor Williams will enjoy, of the true financial position is therefore essential. Only with clarity and honesty can we build a robust authority that will serve our communities effectively from day one. I would also like to make a sincere plea that all members elected to the Joint Committee for West Surrey approach this responsibility with openness, collaboration and cooperation. By setting aside political differences and working together, we can help ensure that the governance arrangements we establish will genuinely benefit all the residents of the new West Surrey Unitary. Madam Mayor, I'm pleased to second the motion.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm afraid this motion to me feels like sour grapes. It also appears to be built on a number of assumptions about matters that frankly have not yet been determined as worded. Let me be clear. Waverley Conservatives, we fully support the principle that Waverley residents must not be burdened with the debt of another council, and we will defend that position resolutely. Government has committed a first tranche of 500 million in order to allow for the proper working through of assets. And it is very much worth reminding that much of the debt is asset backed. Those assets need to now be worked through, a proper asset strategy put in place to ensure value is maximised. A fire sale is a very bad idea. So to go to government now to request intervention seems to be missing, well, really quite a few necessary stages along the way. But I'm actually really concerned about some of the wording in this motion. The motion states that an accurate evidence-based assessment of the proper position of West Surrey finances must be submitted to government as soon as possible. Forgive me, but is that not exactly what has just happened over the last 9 months? Is that not how a decision was reached? Did the leader not read the reports? I read both submissions to council in full, to government, sorry, in full. Government appears to have accepted the county council submission in full. Just because the leader does not like that outcome, this motion now feels like an attempt to rewrite history. The motion appears to state the leader disagrees with the many parties who contributed to that major technical document. He chooses instead to infer that the facts must have been misrepresented or overrepresented. The motion goes on to state, the government has been presented with an overly optimistic financial position by Surrey County Council and their partners. This situation has the potential to undermine the new financial authority's sustainability, blah, blah, blah. This motion implies that Surrey County Council, its officers and all contributing partners chose to mislead or skew figures or mislead or skew government. You're nodding, I see, Councillor Follows, with an overly optimistic financial position. That's a very serious allegation. Is the leader really suggesting that he is right and all of those Surrey County Council officers and contributing organisations are wrong? Yes, you are. Further, may I remind the leader that the Section 151 officers, numerous council officers, MHCLG and indeed the Treasury interrogated the figures presented in both reports in arriving at the decision. The leader's motion appears to infer all of these parties did not do the necessary scrutiny work, but he alone has. I suspect they will all have something to say about that. For those reasons, Chairman, I want no part of this motion. I will be voting against.
Point of personal explanation, Madam.
Thank you.
To be clear, at least 9 Section 151 officers disagreed on the record with the County Council report by supporting the 3 unitary bid. And as I have been very clear, my concerns, as expressed not just by me, but by many finance officers, 151 officers and others within the 9 and indeed in other places, have been questioning the assumptions, not the numbers.
Thank you. Councillor Denis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, some of the things I was going to say have been said. Maybe we should have spoken before. So I can keep this very, very quick. From the second bullet point, I agree. It sounds like Councillor Follows is saying the data is, whether you use the word skewed, poor, unfounded, whatever terminology. And I think that's quite a serious allegation to make. And I think Councillor Follows should provide clear evidence in writing detailing the serious allegations, who these allegations are levelled against, producing the documents, and which partners have colluded to achieve this, because it makes clear reference to partners. And if I was a partner, a statutory partner, I would be extremely concerned of comments that they have colluded to lie and deceive. So I look forward to seeing that documented evidence. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liz Townsend.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I very much support this motion. And I think it's a good idea to actually have a fresh look at these figures. I've been concerned about the disaggregation of services. It's something I've raised time and time again at Surrey and spoken to Tim Oliver about, and also Rachel Waddell, the head of children's services there. Because I had looked into other unitary authorities, and it had been clear to me that disaggregation was not a requirement, that services did not need to be disaggregated, that they could be continued, and that the cost, therefore, of disaggregation could perhaps be reassessed. However, I was told that disaggregation had to happen, and I must admit that those costs were incorporated into the 2 bid and into the 3 bid, and it was made very clear about the 3 bid that obviously disaggregation across 3 would be very, very high. However, the mood has changed, and now it seems to me, and it does seem to me, that disaggregation now is not the only show in town, and that it is clear that disaggregation doesn't have to happen, that things like adult social care, children's services can proceed and not be disaggregated, and therefore the costs of that may be different. And I think it is important, really important, in a debt-laden West Surrey. And, we all know that all debt isn't bad debt, but we have got some bad debt, and we have got a big burden to shoulder in West Surrey. And I think it is really important that we have that independent look, that view of really what is going forward, and also the possibilities of not disaggregating services, by vesting day, and that we really have a new look at that. And I think that is important. We owe it to the residents. We can't just say, oh, well, we took these figures, but we knew some things might have changed. We do have to look at that again. And I think it's sensible to look at it again. And, that is why I would support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thanks, Mayor. Briefly, I do think that there was certainly a question of whose sets of figures do we believe back when the two separate bids went in, because they certainly couldn't be reconciled at the time. And I think everybody in the chamber agreed that the 2 sets did not agree. And our officers were telling us one thing, and Surrey officers were saying another thing. And we all know that. So let's keep the politics out of it, please, if we can, so that we can make these decisions properly. We saw bids being put in that said we would save money. Is there anyone in this chamber who actually believes that when we come out of this, we are going to be saving money And we'll be happily saying to residents, look, we're so much more efficient than we were before that we can charge you less council tax and life's going to be rosy because we've just got rid of a tier of government. And you don't get any representation anymore. You've got the councillors have to do 4 times as much work and all the rest of it. No, honestly, I understand what's being said from both sides. And I think anybody who is turning around and saying, we want an honest and open, transparent process here to make sure that we have the new government, the new councils are going to be financially sustainable. It would be a bit picky. I know the language isn't exactly as some people would want, but I think it's fair in what's said in the bottom half of this that we really do need to insist upon proper figures for the councils to go forward on. And on that basis, I'd 100% support this. I don't think that Surrey is completely wrong or that or our officers are completely wrong, but I know they were never reconciled. And I think we do owe it to our residents to make sure we're doing everything that we can to ensure that what we end up with in a year and a half's time or whatever it is actually going to be able to survive without taking every penny from the workers, because that's the big worry here. This has got to be paid for. We want the sums to be right. We want transparency on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Spence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I find myself in agreement with Councillor Hyman here. And I'm surprised that a call, as I saw here, for an open and transparent State of West Surrey finance report was something that not apparently everyone in this chamber can agree on. I find that somewhat extraordinary. However, one thing that troubled me was that given the track record of many of our soon-to-be partner councils, I was concerned by what was meant by open and transparent. So I was heartened when I heard the leader talk about an independent approach to this report, because it's in my view that only an independent audit ensures transparency and accountability. And without such independence, only a limited reliance can be put on the accounts and the budget. Now, we in this council are lucky and fortunate enough, due to the good work of our officers and the administration, that we have had our 2024-25 accounts signed off by our auditors as a true and fair view of our financial position and with no significant weaknesses identified in our financial sustainability or governance arrangements. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of most of the other councils that we are about to become united with. Runnymede, their audits have been delayed since 2019. Woking's problems, widely publicised, and its own audit committee admitted that a number of the statements in its 2019 accounts and subsequently cannot be validated. Surrey Heath, their auditors disclaimed the 2022 to 23 accounts, saying they are unable to conclude that the authority's financial statements are free from material misstatement. Spelthorne and Guildford have taken similar viewpoints. Members, if we and our residents are to have any confidence that in day one that West Surrey's finances are fit for purpose, we must have a report that this motion is calling for. But that report, in my view, must be one that is independently validated. It must not just be the councils marking their own homework. We, and I think our residents, deserve no less. And without that, I fear that they will not have the confidence in the council going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
No, don't ask for speakers.
Oh, okay. It is nearly 10 o'clock, so Councillor Follows, you just have a right of reply there.
Yes, thank you. Just a few bits. I believe that proposed nomination.
My apologies. Can I just make a point of clarification, please? I think you'll find that the Surrey accounts have been audited.
Thank you.
I will stand to be corrected, Paul,
Thank
but
you.
I think they have.
I didn't say the Surrey accounts
No,
haven't been
They were,
audited.
they were
Thank
tonight.
you. Thank you.
Right,
Councillor Fellows, would you
I'll
like
cover it in
your-
my summing up. Yeah.
Yep.
So I didn't at any point say the Surrey accounts haven't been audited. In fact, Waverley and Surrey are the only two that I believe have been, but the presentation of accounts to the auditors is not the same thing as financial resilience and sustainability. And I would ask those people who think they're the same thing to have a look at what the audited accounts process actually involves. Anyway, for those who were talking about the joint committee, I actually do believe that all of the proposed nominees for the joint committees across party understand the gravity of the appointment and the work that they have to do. If they don't, they very shortly will do very soon because of the workload that's going to come their way. Members need only to look to the financial positions outlined in the 3 unitary bid, which was actually upfront about its assumptions, to see what I'm getting at here. And frequently, we had issues as leaders of councils and members of this sort of borough district authority in getting access to the detail behind some of those assumptions. And bearing in mind that I am one of the people here who is also a county councillor and a group leader at the county, I also had access from inside the county and I still couldn't get to some of the basics of the assumptions. As Councillor Townsend has mentioned even this week, that fundamental financial question of disaggregation has been put into a completely different light, which actually was one of the fundamental basic differences between the two bids. And even that alone should prompt a serious reconsideration of the finances that have been presented. We also know full well, because the government told us in a letter that although both bids were compliant, they were very heavily motivated by and gave weight to clause 2, the one on financial sustainability. I think it's fair to say that anybody who told the government that this was going to be saving money and be in a good position in a few years was likely to find a receptive audience in the government, whether it was correct or not. Councillor Austin, it does, of course, seem that your absolute and resolute defence of the residents of Waverley against debt seems to not go so far as to voting against the unification of Waverley with all of that debt, more than once. It troubles me that you would rather take a stand against me personally than challenge this, even if I'm completely wrong. Is it worth the risk of completely just not doing anything and checking and going through a process to validate all of this in the light of what's going on? I await, by the way, the slew of standards complaints that I'm likely to get from this evening. That usually happens nowadays when I say a word in public and criticise the county in the process. I am quite sure, I am absolutely happy to go and explain to any resident in my borough ward, in my town ward and in my county division that I am being attacked by the Conservatives for having the audacity to ask that somebody check the blasted figures before we enter into a unitary with 5 billion quid's worth of debt. I'm quite happy to explain that to my residents and I'm pretty sure they will understand why I've done it. We have a duty to step up. I'm not even going to try and be more eloquent than Councillor Spence. I think he absolutely said it best. We do now have a duty to do something to make this work for the residents of Waverley. An independent assessment of the financial position of this new unitary before it becomes real, while the government are still in the process of reviewing local government funding as a concept. All of these things feed into making sure that the West is a sustainable financial entity. Right now, even using the Surrey figures as fact, that unitary is in deficit. That debt is significant. The council tax burden on the individual resident to remediate that deficit is significant. We have a duty to go check the figures. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I do, unfortunately, need to call for a recorded vote, apparently, because I thought this would be somewhat easier.
Do you have those who support that?
Members, if you could indicate how you wish to vote when I call your name. Councillor Austin.
Against.
Councillor Beeman.
For.
Oh, where's this one? Sorry. No, it's because I'm thinking. Councillor Busby.
For.
Councillor Cavalieri.
For.
Councillor Crowe.
For.
Councillor Denis. Councillor Deuce.
For.
Councillor Earwaker.
For.
Councillor Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Follows,
4.
Councillor Gale,
For.
Councillor Goodridge,
Against.
Councillor Hess, Councillor Higgins,
4.
Councillor Hussaini,
Against.
Councillor Hyman,
4.
Councillor Keel,
4.
Councillor Long,
4.
Councillor MacLeod,
4.
Councillor Martin,
Against.
Councillor Monroe,
4.
Councillor Murray,
4.
Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Ken Reid,
4.
Councillor Ruth Reid,
4.
Councillor Paul Rivers,
4.
Councillor Penny Rivers,
4.
Councillor Spence,
4.
Councillor Steiger, Councillor Liz Townsend,
4.
Councillor Philip Townsend, Councillor Ward,
4.
Councillor Weldon, Councillor White, Councillor Wicks, Councillor Williams.
4.
Thank you. I'll just,
Councillor Davidson as well.
Councillor Davidson,
4.
That is carried 32 for and 5 against. And now it is past 10 o'clock, so we have to vote whether we're in favour of going on or whether we would postpone the last piece of business and carry on.
Point of
Councillor
order,
Fairclough.
Madam Mayor.
Without debate.
Point
Yes.
of order.
Point of order, yeah.
Rule
What did
10 states that were members to vote against continuing, the mayor would fix a date and time. I was just wondering whether you'd be able to indicate whether you'd be minded to fix it for the 10th of December when we're already here for a meeting.
Is that what you were going to say, Councillor Fairclough?
That's fine. Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. So we have to take a vote on whether we are in favour of stopping. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's 23 in favour of ceasing.
So we have voted to stop. So I will
Madam
close the
Mayor,
meeting. Thank you.
as a matter of procedure,
Madam Mayor, might I ask, as the proposer of the motion, when this is going to be heard again, when I can have the opportunity of putting what I thought was a pretty uncontentious motion? Are we going to hear it on the 10th? Is that